All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Town of Yucca Valley's Town Council meeting for Tuesday, September 7th. It is 6 p.m. We'll call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Council members Dennison.
Here.
Droz.
Here.
Lombardo. Here. Schooler.
Here.
And Mayor Abel.
Here. We'll begin with our Pledge of Allegiance, followed by our invocation, led by our pastor, Jerry Adams, from Gateway Assembly of God. Please rise and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance and then our invocation. Mayor Pro Tem.
Please join us in the pledge to our flag. I pledge allegiance
to our flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Heavenly Father, we take a moment at the beginning of this council meeting to pause to ask for your presence among us, to thank you for your goodness and your grace and your many blessings to us. Lord, thank you for our great community. Thank you for our sheriff's department, our firefighters, those who serve us so sacrificially. Lord, we thank you for this council, for our mayor, for our council members, for everyone who works for and serves our town. Lord, we ask you your blessing upon this meeting tonight, that you would give your guidance, give the council your wisdom, understanding, and divine direction as they seek to make decisions and policies for our community. Lord, we think of those, we pray for those who are dealing with the many disasters and difficulties that have taken place in recent days. Our hearts go out to those who are dealing with all the fires, those who are suffering with the hurricane and the flooding and tornadoes, and so many have lost home, businesses. There's been many lives lost. And we pray for those who lost loved ones and who are recovering right now. Give them strength, God, and help them in the days ahead. And Lord, we will not forget our 13 heroes who made the ultimate sacrifice in serving us and giving their lives in Afghanistan. And Lord, one more thing. In just a few days, we'll be observing the 20th anniversary of 9/11. God, we will never forget all of those who were injured, all of those who died. We remember them, we honor them, and we pray for all of their loved ones who still grieve over their loss. Lord, thank you for your protection. Thank you for those who protect us. And Lord, we pray for your blessing upon this town, state, and country. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Well done.
Thank you, Pastor. Council members, we'll move on to the approval of tonight's agenda.
Sure. I'll move that we approve the agenda.
Dennison, seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Council members Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler.
yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes. Consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are routine matters or formal documents covering previous town council instruction. Items are enacted by one motion and a second without separate discussion unless a member of the town council or the town staff requests dialogue on a specific item at the beginning of the meeting. Requests for public comments on consent agenda items should be filed with the town clerk. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak on consent agenda items?
No, I do not have anybody to speak for that item.
Okay. And we're talking about our first consent agenda items. Is there anyone in the public or online who would like to make a comment about our consent agenda? All right, hearing and seeing none, do I have anyone wanting to pull an item or a motion?
Mayor, I do have a comment on packet page 33, the minutes for August 10th. There is a change that needs to be made on, like I said, stamp page packet 33. Halfway down where it references Town Manager Giacomo, it should be Deputy Town Manager Stickle.
So noted. I'll move that we approve the consent agenda.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Roll call.
Councilmembers Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler.
Yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes. Wonderful. We'll move on to our public hearing. Public hearing, Town Council election district boundaries relating to the 2020 U.S. Census results.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Your first public hearing this evening is to begin the process of the review of the town's electoral district boundaries as they relate to the 2020 U.S. Census results. Similar to the town's first district process in 2017-2018, the town is required to conduct a series of public hearings to gain the community's input on proposed boundaries. As you recall, National Demographics Corporation assisted the town with establishing the electoral districts and is considered a leading expert in this complex process. Earlier this year, the council approved engagement with NDC to assist the town in the redistricting process. With us this evening is Todd Tatum of NDC to explain the rules and goals of the redistricting process and how we will get to formal map adoption before April 2022.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Tatum.
Thank you very much. Mr. Mayor, council, staff, I'd like to introduce myself. Again, my name is Todd Tatum with National Demographic Corporation. And what we want to do tonight is introduce you all to the redistricting process. You know what the districting process is, and I'm sure you all are well aware that every 10 years you're going to have to go through this process where we get the census data and we make sure that all the districts line up in the same proportion. So this is the first of the 4 hearings that we will have. Our next hearing is going to be October 19th, at which time we're hoping that the state of California will have released the data necessary to begin drafting the maps. After the data comes out and the maps are being drafted by the public and the council, we'll have a hearing on November 16th to go over draft maps and a final hearing on February 1st. The deadline for adoption for the map that you all decide on is April 17th, 2022. The major challenge that we had with redistricting this year was the delay in the census data from the U.S. Census, from the federal government. We got no data until mid-August, actually August 12th. Now we have to wait for the state of California to produce what they refer to as prisoner-adjusted data. And those numbers probably will not be released until early October. What the prisoner-adjusted data is they take all the prisoners that are in state prisons and domicile them back where their home is, so they're counted in their home district, not in the prison. So again, that should be released early October, and then we can start drafting maps. So in the redistricting process, we follow actually 3 categories that we refer to as rules and goals. The first is the Federal Voting Rights Act, which are the federal laws that we must adhere to. Some of the laws, as you'll see in the California section, have changed a little bit since you went through this process. But for the federal laws, we have to make sure that each district has equal population. We also must follow the Federal Voting Rights Act, and there can be no racial gerrymandering. For the new state law, the state ranks the order of the new criteria that we must follow. Number 1, the districts must be geographically contiguous, where to the extent practicable. We have to look for undivided neighborhoods and communities of interest. We have to make sure that districts have easily identifiable boundaries, which means we follow major roads, freeways, any other features that are easily understandable. And we have to achieve compactness, meaning that we can't reach around and try to put together groups of people while bypassing a different community. In addition, the state law requires that we not look at partisanship or any political party affiliation. And as you will note in all the available data that NDC produces for this process, we do not show any party registration or affiliation. The third category is other traditional redistricting principles and traditions. There, we want to minimize the shift of voters to different districts. We really want to do our best to make sure that the voters that are in your current districts, we can do as much as we can to make sure they stay there. With those that we do have to change, though, we want to respect the voters' choices and continuity in office, which means that we want to make sure that those who might be voting in a district that's up in 2022, we want to do their best to make sure they can stay there unless we have to move them to a district that goes to 2024. That's an example. We also want to identify any future population growth that you all might know about that we can take into consideration as we're drawing these maps. And we want to strive to preserve the core of your existing districts as best we can. So while we don't have those final numbers that are due out the beginning of October, we do have the U.S. Census numbers. And the graph that you see before you is the 2020 U.S. Census numbers broken off into your districts. What we also have is the final Voting Rights Act analysis, and that's the citizen voting age population. And those percentages that you see there on the graph, those will stay with your districts throughout the whole process. In looking at the estimates, we're confident that these numbers probably won't change a lot. And what we do know is that currently, with the numbers the way they are, we have an estimated deviation of 15.04%. That is the deviation across all the districts. We have to have that number 10% or less. So as you can see, District 3 is over 10.29%, and then you look over at District 1, it's under 4.75%. So what we're going to do is try to get all the districts to come in roughly around 4,348 people. And in districts of your size, a swing of 100 people, residents that we don't get right, could throw off the balance of your districts, and that could be the difference in a legal plan and a non-legal plan. So according to the California Voting Rights Act, we must identify any concentration of protected classes. And the definition of that are Latinos, African Americans, Asian Americans, Native Americans. And according to this map that we've produced, this shows the Latino citizens voting age population. And as you can see, there are some concentration of Latino populations in different pockets around your town. So we want to really make sure that we take that into consideration as we are drawing new district lines or moving district boundaries, that we can keep those communities of interest together and keep them together as a protected class. Not going. There we go. Okay. So we need help from you and the public in defining your neighborhoods. We want to know, first of all, what your neighborhood is, and we want to know what your neighborhood boundaries are. And those boundaries could be, like I said earlier, dividing lines such as highways, roads, rivers, canals, hills, parks, schools, and any other neighborhood landmarks that are unique to your town and to your districts. Beyond defining the neighborhoods, we want to define the communities of interest. And we ask both what your neighborhoods and your community of interest are for two reasons. First of all, the law requires that we ask that. And second, we also want to emphasize that if we do have to make any changes in the current districts to get them into balance, we want to know what the best places are to make those adjustments. We want to make sure that we do our best to prevent the dividing of a neighborhood or a community of interest. Beyond that, you can think, I'm going to ask you and the public to try to come up with what you believe the communities of interest are. We can think of those as shared geographical areas, homeowners associations, areas influenced by the same roads, things that we think of as traditionally bringing a neighborhood or community together. We want to define the common social or economic interest that should be included in a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation. So when we come back at the next hearing in October, we'll be asking your ideas and the public's ideas of what those communities of interest are as we're drawing these first draft maps. So to drawing the draft maps, what you see before you is a computer software called the Story Map, and this takes the demographic data that we'll have available and puts it in what they call the Story Map, which allows you to look at basic socioeconomic characteristics like income, percent of renters, and puts it in a graphic form. This will be available to you on the link on your website, and this is a very easy to use program, much like PowerPoint, and trust me, if I can figure out how to use it, I think anybody can. Beyond that, eventually we'll have an application tool also linked to your website where you'll be able to review the different maps and current districts as well as any proposed revision to the current districts once we get the data in and look at all the revisions that we get in through the draft maps. This will allow you to overlay those areas and put on your communities of interest, and you can see how your maps compare to others. We'll also have paper maps that'll be available for anybody who does not have computer or internet access, and that's an easy way to draw maps. However, if you use the paper maps, you're basically stuck with using just the population. You won't get the other demographic info to plug into those paper maps. So the first stage of this process really is to just explain what I did, that we need to get your input and the public's input on what your neighborhoods are, what your communities of interest are, start thinking about your districts, how you think they might change, what we can do better to, if we need to move lines within your district, and we want to make sure that any changes that we make are best for each of your districts. So with that, I thank you again for the opportunity. NDC thanks you, and I'm available to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Todd. So the recommendation before you this evening, Council, is to conduct a public hearing to receive public input on district boundaries and to receive and file a report on the redistricting process and permissible criteria to be considered to redraw district boundaries. That concludes the staff report, and we would be happy to answer any questions following the public hearing.
All right. So we have an open public hearing. This is the first of several. So I do encourage you to get involved. This is fascinating information. It's always amazing what you can find out as far as your own community and so forth. So does anyone have any questions or comments about the presentation during this public hearing?
Did a great job.
Yeah, it was well explained. Is there anyone online that would like to speak on this? Okay. All right, then we'll bring it back to the council for some questions. I have a couple questions. First of all, I was really proud to see in our community when we first went through this process of just how diverse we have as a community, but also how they're different populations, let's say Hispanic, Latino population, the largest one besides Caucasian, that was dispersed throughout the entire town. There wasn't like one particular area that was heavily dense population. So that was sort of nice to see people in all different parts of the community. Did, for the most part, you saw some changes as far as population. Is that the biggest changes you saw? The preliminary changes that you noticed since the last time you've gone through this process with us?
You know, the biggest changes that we saw, just because we don't have yet that demographic breakdown, were just the changes in population in the district. So obviously District 3 had more of an increase than any of the others. But, you know, when you look, the deviation's only off 654 people. So like I said, a change of 100 people could throw your maps completely off. So,
well, I know some people were a little concerned about, you know, doing districting and so forth. I think our council's been really great with really trying to represent the entire town, not just a district. and that's the attitude that we seem to have. I appreciate that. Were there, and it looked like, I liked that they take in consideration not, people jumping around, like I was 3rd district now, I'm in 2nd district, and now I'm going to be in the 1st district, and I like how sort of the foresight of not trying to disrupt people's ability to vote, because you don't want to confuse the constituents. You want to encourage participation in the process of elections, and I think that's really wise. Statewide, did we see any kind of concerns with people manipulating their maps and so forth to where there's concern on a state level?
Not yet. And NDC doesn't work like on the congressional districts. All that's done through the state houses. But as far as any other municipal districts, cities, counties, special districts, water districts, school districts, we all have to wait for that state data that comes out beginning of October. So any maps that are being drawn now, if you hear of another city or town that's drawing maps, they're doing it based on estimates or 2010 demographics.
Okay. And again, we don't want to jump the gun and start drawing maps and confusing people, and then all of a sudden we're changing them again. So it's best to get all the information and do it properly and have public hearing and get the input on several maps that we can choose from. Is that correct? Okay. Any other? Yes, Councilmember Dennison?
Yeah, Todd, thank you very much for the presentation. That was a good kickoff for us. 2 questions. One, I was just looking, we looked at the timeline on how the production of the maps, how that goes. But I'm looking at what would be the start time of the maps? When would they best fit into our timelines as far as elections and changes in the community? The other part was, you mentioned the story map, and you mentioned renters and income as 2 pieces. How do we look at rentals and those positions of demographics when rentals in our area sometimes are short-term rentals and sometimes they're more established longer-term rentals? Is there a process that's used to piece those out? Because they really would address a different demographic all the time. You could get changes in those areas. And I don't know how if that's looked at.
Yeah, and Tom, Jex, maybe but I would assume that a short-term rental is probably not going to show up on your population count. But any other sort of rental, they're a citizen, they're a member of your community, so they would be counted. So it's not just homeowners, but the demographics will allow you to see who the renters are and those different. Also, you'll have income variations, and it'll show those throughout your town.
Okay, so those pieces will get pulled out then
Yes.
of consideration. And then what were you looking at, the first part, starting to use the maps once they're produced?
Well, when Leslie and I, and everybody decided on the dates, we assumed that October 19th would be a second non-map public hearing. But what we're hearing now is that we could get the data beginning of October. So October 19th really could be, I'm knocking on wood here, it could be a kickoff to actually drawing the draft maps and getting everybody engaged, bringing them back in November, going over what we've got, getting more people engaged should they show up. And we encourage everybody in the public to, draw their own map, bring a map in, email a map in, fax it in, drop it off, whatever they can do. So I'm hoping October, we're starting the mapping process.
Great, well, thank you. So this is truly a community participation project?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
All right, Councilmember Lombardo.
Thank you for your presentation, Todd. This was very clear. It's really important that the public is aware that this is a great opportunity to be involved. What types of things are you doing to reach out to the public to get them to participate more in this very important part of being a representative government?
Really, right now, what we're doing is like working with your staff, making sure that the public hearings are properly noticed, and then giving ideas and suggestions how to get it out on your website, through any social media that you might use. So it's that sort of thing.
Okay, and there's a group of people that follow our town on the internet, and they'll be blasted with information on this?
Yeah, the town will obviously use its own social media platforms as well as other communication methods that we typically use to try and engage the public for those activities that are important, such as this. So that will be part of our outreach ongoing.
And part of the communities of interest that you're talking about would be things like trailer parks and housing developments, that sort of thing, where it's groups of people in a certain location that may have different needs or different concerns than the population as general.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we encourage everybody in the public to, not that we want to divide you into all these little groups. We want to try to make sure that you're represented, and if you're, feeling special need of some sort or another that you don't feel we're meeting, this is your great opportunity to speak up and make sure that you're counted in the right group so that your voice can be multiplied with people with similar thoughts.
Right.
So, okay, I thank you very much. I think we're looking forward to this, and it's, like was mentioned before, we try not to make decisions based on our district, and we're kind of more together in what's best for Yucca Valley, and I think that I'm very proud to be associated with these council members. I think we've done a good job of trying to represent the community at large, and I'm hoping that this will just solidify that into the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and you'll have other opportunities to give us input in the future. All right, so we'll move on to our next public hearing. That'll be the Underground Utility District Number 1. We'll open that up. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. Town staff and Southern California Edison representatives have been having ongoing discussions regarding properties to be included or excluded from the undergrounding district. These discussions could have cost implications for private property owners, as well as costs for the district. Southern California Edison staff, and in constant communication with the town's engineering staff, are requesting this evening, and this results in a modified recommendation, that the town council open the public hearing, which the mayor has done this evening, and continue this public hearing to your meeting of October 5th. This action would allow both town staff and Southern California Edison staff to finalize their analysis of those properties which may be included, and those undergrounding costs being covered by the Rural 20A funds. So the recommended action is that this public hearing be continued to October 5th. Mayor, you may want to ask if there is anyone in attendance this evening. Due to the noticing that town staff has sent out, if anyone is in attendance that would like to comment on this item before the council continues the matter. That concludes the staff presentation. Be happy to answer questions following the public hearing.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anything in writing on this particular item? All right, does anyone in the public have any questions or would like to make a comment on the underground utility district formation? And no one online as well? All right, so I will, council, if there's any questions right now?
I think we can carry it forward.
Okay, I will go ahead and continue this public hearing until October 5th. If that, do I need to take a motion? Do I have a motion to continue this public hearing item to October 5th?
Make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion with Councilmember Lombardo and a second with Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Councilmembers Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler.
Yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes, so we'll continue this on to October 5th. All right, now we'll move on to item number 8. We're moving along quite quickly. Department reports. Hopefully I didn't sabotage that.
Not at all.
Community livability survey. This is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, I think you will find it interesting, Mayor and Council. So the recommended action is that the council receive and file the community livability presentation. Just as by way of background, in accordance with the town council's established planning horizon, you'll remember that the council is underway with an update to your strategic plan for the upcoming planning horizon. Once completed and approved, the strategic plan will be the framework for the town's next 2-year budget cycle. To assist the staff, council, and community in understanding the needs and priorities of the community, the town council authorized the completion of a statistically reliable community livability opinion survey. The purpose of the survey was to provide the town with an unbiased and statistically reliable understanding of its residents' satisfaction, priorities, and concerns as they relate to services. This year, the focus of the study was directed to identify key issues of concern for the residents, measure residents' overall satisfaction with the town's efforts to provide municipal services, evaluate perceptions of issues, test various projects or initiatives for relative prioritization and importance. This year, we also looked at the role of municipal incentives. We looked at including the community's input on short-term vacation rentals, to determine the effectiveness of town communication efforts with residents, and a number of other objectives. You'll recollect that the council approved True North Research as a preferred vendor for our study. True North has done our last 2 studies as well. And that study and survey have been completed now. And so this evening we have Dr. McClarney, Tim McClarney of True North Research, to provide the summary of the results. And then council will be able to engage along with the community in questions of Dr. McClarney afterwards. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. McClarney to walk us through the Community Livability Survey. Tim, great to see you again.
Oh, thank you, Curtis. I appreciate the warm welcome, and good evening, Mayor and members of council. I have a presentation that I can share off my computer, if that's okay.
Yes, you can go ahead and share your screen, Dr. McClarney.
Great. So let me do that. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we
Wonderful.
can.
Wonderful. Well, again, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Dr. Tim McClarney, I'm the president of True North Research, and we are a firm that for the last 20 years has specialized in working with California cities as well as other types of public agencies and using surveys to develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve. To date, we've worked on over 1,000 research studies for public agencies. 400 of those studies were similar to the one that we have here for California cities, where we're reaching out to residents to understand what their needs and priorities and preferences are with respect to the services provided by a municipality, and also to understand how residents view a municipality's performance in meeting these needs. Tonight's presentation covers the highlights of the study. There is a much more detailed report available for those who are interested. And as we go through this presentation, I welcome questions from council as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference. Okay, so I think Curtis did a good job of overviewing the basic purpose of the study and how the town uses it. You know, I just would sort of summarize by saying I see these studies as being kind of one part community needs assessment and one part performance measurement, meaning we're trying to understand what the needs and priorities are of your residents as they pertain to the services and facilities and policies provided by the town. Once you understand those needs, we like to flip it around and look at how well they view the town's performance in meeting those needs. Where are you exceeding their expectations? Where are you meeting their expectations? And where might there be some room for improvement? Every year that we do this, it's also an opportunity to dive into topics that are of particular interest to the town at that time. You'll see in this study, we did a deep dive on tourism and in particular short-term vacation rentals as part of this process, as well as budget priorities and customer service. One of the areas that we also look at obviously is communication to try and keep up with what is a constantly sort of shifting arena in terms of where people are getting their information these days. And so in terms of the methodology or how we went about conducting this study, this was basically the same methodology that we've used with the town the last few years with one important exception. We are using what's called a mixed method approach, where we're using multiple recruiting methods, right? So we're not just relying on telephone, we're using both email, text, as well as telephone. And we're also allowing respondents the opportunity to participate by telephone or online at a protected website. Everything is protected so that if I send a link to a particular person that has been randomly selected as part of our sample, that person can take the survey. They can only take it once. They can't forward that link on to 20 of their best friends and encourage them to take it and thereby sort of disrupt our sampling plan. And so everything's protected. We start out with a random selection of Yucca Valley households, and then we recruit from that. This cycle, we had 569 residents chosen at random that participated in the survey. That is more than the amount that we had contracted for because the response rate was particularly good. But because this was a random sample of 569 and not a census of all of your adult residents, it does have what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. In this case, that's about plus or minus 4%. What that means is that the results we'll talk about tonight, we can be 95% confident that they are within 4% plus or minus of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your adult residents. The one change to the methodology between this year and the past has to do with our recruiting by text. In the past, we used mail, email, and telephone for recruiting. We had swapped out the mailed letters for text because we have found that to be a much more productive way of reaching residents in recent years, or in recent months. So on to the results. This first slide, we open up the survey by asking individuals to tell us how they would rate Yucca Valley on a number of dimensions, including the overall quality of life in Yucca Valley, as a place to work, as a place to retire, as a place to raise a family, as well as a place to shop and dine. You can see here that overall Yucca Valley gets its highest ratings for the overall quality of life. You had about 2/3 of residents rate that as excellent or good, followed by as a place to retire, about 60% rating that as excellent and good. I can tell you that's a little unusual for a municipality in California. Normally, they view these cities as a place to retire much further down on the scale. And so you're a little unusual that way. When you compare the 2021 results to the last time we did this study in 2019, there was one statistically significant change between then and now, and that has to do with the percentage who rated Yucca Valley as an excellent or good place to work. That increased about 6% between 2019 and today.
Nice.
Following that question, we asked a couple of open-ended questions. The first of which is we simply asked them to tell us what they like most about Yucca Valley, that the town government should make sure to preserve in the future. And you can see here, by open-ended, what I mean is we ask the question, they are free to tell us in their own words anything that comes to mind. So we're not providing them with this list and asking them to choose. We simply let them tell us in their own words. We then go back and review the verbatim responses and group them into the categories that you see here. And so you see the most common sort of comments centered on either the atmosphere of Yucca Valley, small town, peaceful, quiet, right? So references to wanting to preserve that aspect of the town, as well as protecting and preserving the natural environment. So when you look at those top responses, they tend to center around those themes. We did see that when compared to 2019, limiting growth and development made the top 5 for the first time. That was really sort of the one sort of noticeable change. It had always been on your list, but it wasn't top 5. Now you can see it checks in around 7% or so. We did also have about 7% who said, top of mind, the thing that I most want to see preserved or addressed is essentially to reduce or limit short-term vacation rentals. You had about 7% mention that. So that was what they like to preserve. The other question we asked is if the town could change one thing about Yucca Valley to make it a better place to live, what change would they like to see? Here again, open-ended. They got to tell us in their own words. We reviewed the responses and grouped them into categories you see here. Number one response in 2021 was a reference to reducing, limiting, or regulating short-term vacation rentals. You had about 16% who mentioned that issue, followed by economic development in terms of more high-end restaurants and dining options at 11%. As well as at 8% more high-end shopping centers, retail stores, and then followed by improving infrastructure. Although economic development has been a consistent theme for the town over time, you see that residents are supportive of that. The topic of vacation rentals was new to the top 5 for 2021. And we'll have more to say on short-term vacation rentals here in a little bit. So this is arguably one of the most important questions in the survey because it's the answers to the question, generally speaking, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the town of Yucca Valley is doing to provide town services? Because we are asking them to speak about the town's performance overall, we're not asking them to rate a specific service. This can be considered an overall performance rating for the town. And what you see here is in 2021, despite the fact that we've just been through, about 18 months of a pandemic, that the overall satisfaction rating was quite consistent with what we've seen in the last two cycles, at about 2/3 of residents saying that they are satisfied with the town's overall performance, yet about a quarter said they were dissatisfied, and the remaining being unsure. They are, again, despite everything that's happened in the last 18 months, what we see is that these results are statistically unchanged from where we were prior to the pandemic, which I think is quite an accomplishment. And I'll have a little more to say on that at the end of the presentation as well. We did also find, again, because we have this topic of short-term vacation rentals, when we looked at the results of this question in terms of how satisfied they are with the town's overall efforts to provide municipal services, we did see a relationship between their experiences with short-term vacation rentals and how they answered this question. You tended to find those who were opposed to allowing short-term vacation rentals, those who have
Disrupt people's ability to vote, because you don't want to confuse the constituents. You want to encourage participation in the process of elections, and I think that's really wise. Statewide, did we see any kind of concerns with people manipulating their maps and so forth to where there's concern on a state level?
Not yet. And NDC doesn't work like on the congressional districts. All that's done through the state houses. But as far as any other municipal districts, cities, counties, special districts, water districts, school districts, we all have to wait for that state data that comes out beginning of October. So any maps that are being drawn now, if you hear of another city or town that's drawing maps, they're doing it based on estimates or 2010 demographics.
Okay. And again, we don't want to jump the gun and start drawing maps and confusing people, and then all of a sudden we're changing them again. So it's best to get all the information and do it properly and have public hearing and get the input on several maps that we can choose from. Is that correct? Okay. Any other? Yes, Councilmember Dennison?
Yeah, Todd, thank you very much for the presentation. That was a good kickoff for us. Two questions. One, I was just looking, we looked at the timeline on how the production of the maps, how that goes. But I'm looking at what would be the start time of the maps? When would they best fit into our timelines as far as elections and changes in the community? The other part was, you mentioned the story map, and you mentioned renters and income as two pieces. How do we look at rentals and those positions of demographics when rentals in our area sometimes are short-term rentals and sometimes they're more established longer-term rentals? Is there a process that's used to piece those out? Because they really would address a different demographic all the time. You could get changes in those areas. And I don't know if that's looked at.
Yeah, and Tom, Jax, maybe but I would assume that a short-term rental is probably not going to show up on your population count. But any other sort of rental, they're a citizen, they're a member of your community, so they would be counted. So it's not just homeowners, but the demographics will allow you to see who the renters are and those different. Also, you'll have income variations, and it'll show those throughout your town.
Okay, so those pieces will get pulled out then?
Yes.
Of consideration. And then what were we looking at, the first part, starting to use the maps once they're produced?
Well, when Leslie and I, and everybody decided on the dates, we assumed that October 19th would be a second non-map public hearing. But what we're hearing now is that we could get the data beginning of October. So October 19th really could be, I'm knocking on wood here, it could be a kickoff to actually drawing the draft maps and getting everybody engaged, bringing them back in November, going over what we've got, getting more people engaged should they show up. And we encourage everybody in the public to, draw their own map, bring a map in, email a map in, fax it in, drop it off, whatever they can do. So I'm hoping October we're starting the mapping process.
Great, well, thank you. So this is truly a community participation project?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
All right, Councilmember Lombardo.
Thank you for your presentation, Todd. This was very clear. It's really important that the public is aware that this is a great opportunity to be involved. What types of things are you doing to reach out to the public to get them to participate more in this very important part of being a representative government?
Really, right now, what we're doing is like working with your staff, making sure that the public hearings are properly noticed, and then giving ideas and suggestions how to get it out on your website, through any social media that you might use. So it's that sort of thing.
Okay, and there's a group of people that follow our town on the internet, and they'll be blasted with information on this?
Yeah, the town will obviously use its own social media platforms as well as other communication methods that we typically use to try and engage the public for those activities that are important such as this. So that will be part of our outreach ongoing.
And part of the communities of interest that you're talking about would be things like trailer parks and housing developments, that sort of thing, where it's groups of people in a certain location that may have different needs or different concerns than the population as general?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we encourage everybody in the public to, not that we want to divide you into all these little groups. We want to try to make sure that you're represented, and if you're, feeling special need of some sort or another that you don't feel we're meeting, this is your great opportunity to speak up and make sure that you're counted in the right group so that your voice can be multiplied with people with similar thoughts.
Right.
So, okay, I thank you very much. I think we're looking forward to this, and it's, like was mentioned before, we try not to make decisions based on our district, and we're kind of more together in what's best for Yucca Valley, and I think that I'm very proud to be associated with these council members. I think we've done a good job of trying to represent the community at large, and I'm hoping that this will just solidify that into the future.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate that. We'll go ahead and close the public hearing, and you'll have other opportunities to give us input in the future. All right, so we'll move on to our next public hearing. That'll be the Underground Utility District Number 1. We'll open that up. Staff report, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. Town staff and Southern California Edison representatives have been having ongoing discussions regarding properties to be included or excluded from the undergrounding district. These discussions could have cost implications for private property owners, as well as costs for the district. Southern California Edison staff, and in constant communication with the town's engineering staff, are requesting this evening, and this results in a modified recommendation, that the town council open the public hearing, which the mayor has done this evening, and continue this public hearing to your meeting of October 5th. This action would allow both town staff and Southern California Edison staff to finalize their analysis of those properties which may be included, and those undergrounding costs being covered by the Rural 20A funds. So the recommended action is that this public hearing be continued to October 5th. Mayor, you may want to ask if there is anyone in attendance this evening. Due to the noticing that town staff has sent out, if anyone is in attendance that would like to comment on this item before the council continues the matter. That concludes the staff presentation. Be happy to answer questions following the public hearing.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anything in writing on this particular item? All right, does anyone in the public have any questions or would like to make a comment on the underground utility district formation? And no one online as well? All right, so I will, council, if there's any questions right now?
No, I think we can carry it forward.
Yeah, I will go ahead and continue this public hearing until October 5th. If that, do I need to take a motion? Do I have a motion to continue this public hearing item to October 5th?
Make that motion.
Second.
We have a motion with Councilmember Lombardo and a second with Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Councilmembers Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler.
Yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes, so we'll continue this on to October 5th. All right, now we'll move on to item number 8. We're moving along quite quickly. Department reports. Hopefully I didn't sabotage that.
Not at all.
Community livability survey. This is going to be interesting as well.
Yeah, I think you will find it interesting, Mayor and Council. So the recommended action is that the council receive and file the community livability presentation. Just as by way of background, in accordance with the Town Council's established planning horizon, you'll remember that the council is underway with an update to your strategic plan for the upcoming planning horizon. Once completed and approved, the strategic plan will be the framework for the town's next two-year budget cycle. To assist the staff, council, and community in understanding the needs and priorities of the community, the Town Council authorized the completion of a statistically reliable community livability opinion survey. The purpose of the survey was to provide the town with an unbiased and statistically reliable understanding of its residents' satisfaction, priorities, and concerns as they relate to services. This year, the focus of the study was directed to identify key issues of concern for the residents, measure residents' overall satisfaction with the town's efforts to provide municipal services, evaluate perceptions of issues, test various projects or initiatives for relative prioritization and importance. This year, we also looked at the role of municipal incentives. We looked at including the community's input on short-term vacation rentals to determine the effectiveness of town communication efforts with residents and a number of other objectives. You'll recollect that the council approved True North Research as a preferred vendor for our study. True North has done our last two studies as well. And that study and survey have been completed now. And so this evening we have Dr. McClarney, Tim McClarney of True North Research, to provide the summary of the results. And then council will be able to engage along with the community in questions of Dr. McClarney afterwards. So with that, I turn it over to Dr. McClarney to walk us through the Community Livability Survey. Tim, great to see you again.
Oh, thank you, Curtis. I appreciate the warm welcome, and good evening, Mayor and members of council. I have a presentation that I can share off my computer, if that's okay.
Yes, you can go ahead and share your screen, Dr. McClarney.
Great. So let me do that. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we
Wonderful.
can.
Wonderful. Well, again, good evening, Mayor and members of council. Dr. Tim McClarney, I'm the president of True North Research, and we are a firm that for the last 20 years has specialized in working with California cities as well as other types of public agencies and using surveys to develop a statistically reliable understanding of the communities and the customers that they serve. To date, we've worked on over 1,000 research studies for public agencies. 400 of those studies were similar to the one that we have here for California cities, where we're reaching out to residents to understand what their needs and priorities and preferences are with respect to the services provided by a municipality, and also to understand how residents view a municipality's performance in meeting these needs. Tonight's presentation covers the highlights of the study. There is a much more detailed report available for those who are interested. And as we go through this presentation, I welcome questions from council as I go or at the end, whichever is your preference. Okay, so I think Curtis did a good job of overviewing the basic purpose of the study and how the town uses it. You know, I just would sort of summarize by saying I see these studies as being kind of one part community needs assessment and one part performance measurement, meaning we're trying to understand what the needs and priorities are of your residents as they pertain to the services and facilities and policies provided by the town. Once you understand those needs, we like to flip it around and look at how well they view the town's performance in meeting those needs. Where are you exceeding their expectations? Where are you meeting their expectations? And where might there be some room for improvement? Every year that we do this, it's also an opportunity to dive into topics that are of particular interest to the town at that time. You'll see in this study, we did a deep dive on tourism and in particular short-term vacation rentals as part of this process, as well as budget priorities and customer service. One of the areas that we also look at obviously is communication to try and keep up with what is a constantly sort of shifting arena in terms of where people are getting their information these days. And so in terms of the methodology or how we went about conducting this study, this was basically the same methodology that we've used with the town the last few years with one important exception. We are using what's called a mixed method approach, where we're using multiple recruiting methods, right? So we're not just relying on telephone, we're using both email, text, as well as telephone. And we're also allowing respondents the opportunity to participate by telephone or online at a protected website. Everything is protected so that if I send a link to a particular person that has been randomly selected as part of our sample, that person can take the survey. They can only take it once. They can't forward that link on to 20 of their best friends and encourage them to take it and thereby sort of disrupt our sampling plan. And so everything's protected. We start out with a random selection of Yucca Valley households, and then we recruit from that. This cycle, we had 569 residents chosen at random that participated in the survey. That is more than the amount that we had contracted for because the response rate was particularly good. But because this was a random sample of 569 and not a census of all of your adult residents, it does have what's known as a margin of error due to sampling. In this case, that's about plus or minus 4%. What that means is that the results we'll talk about tonight, we can be 95% confident that they are within 4% plus or minus of what we would have found had we spoken with all of your adult residents. The one change to the methodology between this year and the past has to do with our recruiting by text. In the past, we used mail, email, and telephone for recruiting. We had swapped out the mailed letters for text because we have found that to be a much more productive way of reaching residents in recent years, or in recent months. So on to the results. This first slide, we open up the survey by asking individuals to tell us how they would rate Yucca Valley on a number of dimensions, including the overall quality of life in Yucca Valley, as a place to work, as a place to retire, as a place to raise a family, as well as a place to shop and dine. You can see here that overall Yucca Valley gets its highest ratings for the overall quality of life. You had about 2/3 of residents rate that as excellent or good, followed by as a place to retire, about 60% rating that as excellent and good. I can tell you that's a little unusual for a municipality in California. Normally, they view these cities as a place to retire much further down on the scale. And so you're a little unusual that way. When you compare the 2021 results to the last time we did this study in 2019, there was one statistically significant change between then and now, and that has to do with the percentage who rated Yucca Valley as an excellent or good place to work. That increased about 6% between 2019 and today.
Nice.
Following that question, we asked a couple of open-ended questions. The first of which is we simply asked them to tell us what they like most about Yucca Valley, that the town government should make sure to preserve in the future. And you can see here, by open-ended, what I mean is we ask the question, they are free to tell us in their own words anything that comes to mind. So we're not providing them with this list and asking them to choose. We simply let them tell us in their own words. We then go back and review the verbatim responses and group them into the categories that you see here. And so you see the most common sort of comments centered on either the atmosphere of Yucca Valley, small town, peaceful, quiet, right? So references to wanting to preserve that aspect of the town, as well as protecting and preserving the natural environment. So when you look at those top responses, they tend to center around those themes. We did see that when compared to 2019, limiting growth and development made the top 5 for the first time. That was really sort of the one sort of noticeable change. It had always been on your list, but it wasn't top 5. Now you can see it checks in around 7% or so. We did also have about 7% who said, top of mind, the thing that I most want to see preserved or addressed is essentially to reduce or limit short-term vacation rentals. Yet about 7% mentioned that. So that was what they like to preserve. The other question we asked is if the town could change one thing about Yucca Valley to make it a better place to live, what change would they like to see? Here again, open-ended. They got to tell us in their own words. We review the responses and group them into categories you see here. Number one response in 2021 was a reference to reducing, limiting, or regulating short-term vacation rentals. Yet about 16% who mentioned that issue, followed by economic development in terms of more high-end restaurants and dining options at 11%. As well as at 8% more high-end shopping centers, retail stores, and then followed by improving infrastructure. Although economic development has been a consistent theme for the town over time, you see that residents are supportive of that. the topic of vacation rentals was new to the top 5 for 2021. And we'll have more to say on short-term vacation rentals here in a little bit. So this is arguably one of the most important questions in the survey because it's the answers to the question, generally speaking, are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the job the town of Yucca Valley is doing to provide town services? Because we are asking them to speak about the town's performance overall, we're not asking them to rate a specific service. This can be considered an overall performance rating for the town. And what you see here is in 2021, despite the fact that we've just been through about 18 months of a pandemic, that the overall satisfaction rating was quite consistent with what we've seen in the last 2 cycles, at about 2/3 of residents saying that they are satisfied with the town's overall performance, yet about a quarter said they were dissatisfied, and the remaining being unsure. They are, again, despite everything that's happened in the last 18 months, what we see is that these results are statistically unchanged from where we were prior to the pandemic, which I think is quite an accomplishment. And I'll have a little more to say on that at the end of the presentation as well. We did also find, again, because we have this topic of short-term vacation rentals, when we looked at the results of this question in terms of how satisfied they are with the town's overall efforts to provide municipal services, we did see a relationship between their experiences with short-term vacation rentals and how they answered this question. You tended to find those who were opposed to allowing short-term vacation rentals, those who have a short-term vacation rental in their neighborhood, those who had experienced problems with a short-term vacation rental in their neighborhood, they were somewhat less likely to report being satisfied with the town's overall performance than their counterparts. So the last question was about the town's performance overall. At this point in the survey, we then unpacked this into 15 specific service areas that you see here on this slide, and we asked 2 related questions. The first question in this series is, how important is this service to you? Right? Is it extremely important or very important, which are represented by the dark blue and medium blue bars? Is it somewhat important, not at all important? That's represented by the negative space off to the right. We asked these in a random order, but we have sorted them from high to low here based on that combined percentage of folks who said that this service is either extremely or very important. And what you find is that when you sort of peruse the various services here and the ranking, you'll see a pattern, and that is that public works and public safety tend to rise to the top of the list in terms of the service areas that residents view as the most important. So number 1 here, providing fire protection, prevention, emergency medical services, followed by maintaining local streets and roads, maintaining a low crime rate, keeping public buildings, parks, and facilities clean and attractive, preparing town for emergencies, providing police services. Again, you see at the top of the list a lot of either public safety or public works. As you move down the list toward the bottom, these are areas that that are, although still viewed as important, they just don't stack up against public safety and public works in the same way. So providing special events like community festivals, 4th of July celebration, for example, you have fewer people saying that those are either extremely or very important. Comparing again from 2019 to 2021, we did see an increase in the importance assigned to managing traffic congestion. So that went up about 6%, which is a significant change. We also saw a decrease in a few areas, attracting new employers and jobs to town. That reduced in importance by about 10%. Providing police services went down about 6%. Maintaining a low crime rate went down about 4%. So same list of services, only now we're asking them the other question, which was not how important this is to you, but how satisfied are you with the town's effort to provide this service? Here again, we've asked them in a random order, but we sorted them from high to low based on that combined percentage of folks who said they're either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied. Top of the list, we have more public safety, right? So you have fire protection, prevention, and EMS, followed by providing police services. And then we get into some of the parks and rec and community services. So providing parks, sport fields, recreation facilities, providing special events like community festivals and the 4th of July celebration, etc. Towards the bottom of the list, these are the service areas that residents are less satisfied with in terms of the town's overall performance. Addressing homelessness. This, by the way, is a very common pattern, particularly in California. That issue has been number 1 in a lot of communities, and when you look at where residents are sort of more frustrated or less satisfied with a city's ability to deal with an issue. Homelessness has been kind of at the top of that list, and you see here it ranks that way here. Managing traffic congestion and then attracting new employers and jobs to town. So those areas had somewhat less satisfaction. We did see a few changes between 2019 and 2021 here in terms of satisfaction as well. We saw that there were declines in satisfaction for providing special events and recreation programs. This makes a lot of sense because we've been in a pandemic, which is for most cities and towns really hampered your ability to provide recreation programs and events. And so it kind of makes sense that the satisfaction levels will be down there. And then keeping public buildings clean and attractive and managing traffic congestion as well. So shifting gears, we're now going to transition into the topics of tourism and short-term vacation rentals. So the first question you see here, the results of on the slide, we simply reminded folks that the town of Yucca Valley is a natural stop for tourists who visit Joshua Tree National Park. For what they may have seen, would you say that the number of tourists in Yucca Valley has increased, stayed about the same, or decreased over the past 3 years? We asked this question in 2019 as well. In 2019, before the pandemic, you had 80% who had perceived that the number of tourists had increased during the past 3 years. When we asked the same question in 2021, obviously 18 months into the pandemic, you see that the percentage is really similar, right, at 82%. And so a couple of different ways you could interpret this, that really nothing's changed, but it's also could be a year-over-year thing, right? That in 2019, they had witnessed an increase compared to, say, 2017, 2018, and by 2021, they're looking back at 2019 and saying, yeah, it hasn't leveled off, we're seeing an increase. We went on to ask individuals overall, would they say that tourism is mostly positive or mostly negative for the town of Yucca Valley? Here again, it's a question we asked in 2019 and 2021. You see in 2021, among those with an opinion, so if you sort of zero out the 15% gray bar there, you have 3 out of 4 folks with an opinion say that tourism is generally positive for the town of Yucca Valley. You had about 1 out of 4 who said it's negative. So still, 3 out of 4 residents are viewing tourism as a positive force. That, nevertheless, is a little bit different than what we saw in 2019, where you had at that time 76% of respondents say that they, view tourism mostly positive. You had just 12% who viewed it mostly negative. So it's been a little bit of a shift in the last couple of years. For those who had stated that they view tourism as mostly positive for Yucca Valley, we went on to ask them what they think are the positive aspects of tourism. This was an open-ended question. We didn't provide them with the list you see here. They got to just tell us in their own words, and then we grouped them into the categories that you see here based on our review of the verbatims. And you can see that the positives tend to focus on the economic impacts of tourism for the town. So increased sales, income, good revenue source, 42% mentioned something along that. Strengthens the business community, good for local business, 29%, improves the local economy in general, 17%, and then increases jobs and employment opportunities, 10%. So a real focus on how tourism really pumps dollars into the community and supports your local economy and your local businesses as well as town services. For those who viewed tourism as mostly negative, we asked them again in an open-ended manner to describe what they think are the negative aspects of tourism for Yucca Valley. And traffic congestion was the number one at 45%, yet about 25% who cited, tourism sort of fuels the short-term vacation rental issue, and they see that as a negative. About 17% mentioned something about the tourists themselves, claiming you occasionally get rude or disrespectful tourists, and then about 15% mentioned trash and litter. So after this intro about we're looking at what their perceptions are of tourism, what's changed, and whether they think it's positive or negative for the town, we then zeroed in on the issue of short-term vacation rentals, and we have a couple of different questions here. The first of which, we went on to define a short-term vacation rental so there would be no ambiguity about what we're talking about. And we said, to be clear, a short-term vacation rental is a private home or condo that is rented for less than 30 days at a time, often on a daily or weekly basis to people on vacation. These properties are often listed through Airbnb, VRBO, or similar services. So we wanted to make sure everybody sort of has the same definition of what a short-term vacation rental is. We went on to then explain that the town of Yucca Valley allows private property owners to rent their residence on a short-term basis, provided that they seek proper permits and comply with all laws, codes, and regulations. Then we asked, in general, do they support or oppose the policy of allowing short-term vacation rentals in town? And here are the results. You see that fairly evenly split. You had 45% who say they support it at this point in the poll. You had 41% who oppose, and the remainder were unsure or preferred not to answer. We tended to find that younger residents, so I keep getting older, so younger is now 55 and under, and those who've been in town less than 10 years, so we're somewhat newer residents in the big scheme of things, were the most supportive of having short-term vacation rentals. Some of your older residents and more established residents were somewhat less supportive overall. So age and length of residence were sort of the driving factors in terms of how folks responded to this question. So we went on and asked individuals in an open-ended manner, is there a particular reason why you either support or oppose this policy? So supporters were asked about why they support allowing short-term vacation rentals. Opponents were asked why they oppose. We have color-coded the answers here to these open-ended responses. Green are the responses of those who were generally supportive. Red are the ones who were generally opposed. You can see, focusing first on the reds at the top of the list, there's really two issues that sort of popped out as the reasons why they don't support short-term vacation rentals. For some, about 18% mentioned that it reduces the availability and affordability of homes in town. And then you had about 16% who referenced something about tourists being either misbehaving or rude or loud, and that's why they don't like short-term vacation rentals. And then on down, a little lower in the list, you see references to there's just too many of them, we should limit them, and or that they're unregulated and need more oversight. So that's among those who were opposed. Among those who support allowing short-term vacation rentals, you can see that it really centers on the economic benefits of this to either the town, to the local economy, or to the property owner themselves, as well as a reference to, the private property owner should have the right to make the decision about their own property. So after that open-ended question where we let them tell us in their own words why they support or oppose, we wanted to actually build a profile of how residents tend to view short-term vacation rentals. And so for each of the statements you see there on the left side of the slide, we simply asked individuals to tell us, do they agree or disagree with that statement? And these are a mix of both what I would call positive and negative statements, right? Some of them sort of espouse the merits or a benefit of having short-term vacation rentals in town. Some of them focus on the negative. And what you see is interesting is every single statement we tested had a majority agree with the statement, and sometimes as much as 75%. And so as you read down the list, what becomes clear, and it's clear in other parts of the survey as well, is that residents have somewhat nuanced opinions about short-term vacation rentals. It's not black or white. It's not they're horrible or they're great. What they see is that they recognize both the benefits of short-term vacation rentals to the town, right? And they also see some of the problems. So top levels of agreement that people who vacation here provide a much needed boost to the local economy, stores, restaurants, and businesses. Here again, the economic benefits of short-term vacation rentals, and that many of the jobs in Yucca Valley depend on visitors and tourism. But then you also see some of the negatives. Number 3, it's hard to find affordable housing in Yucca Valley because there's so many short-term vacation rentals, right? And things like more restrictions and enforcement are needed on short-term vacation rentals. So you have sort of high levels of strong agreement with that. And so this sort of paints a picture for me as somebody who works with opinion data all the time that, this is not a black and white issue for your residents, that they see the benefits of this, but they also see the downsides. And so that, I think, plays into some of the recommendations I'll have at the end. Having measured their attitudes, we also went on to ask about the town's considering taking several actions related to the short-term vacation rentals that you see here on the left side of the slide. And we simply ask them to tell us the degree to which they support or oppose the town taking these actions. What's interesting here, again, you have majority support for every action we tested, with all but one of them having 2/3 or more residents say that they support the town taking that action. So although we see initially a little bit of division in terms of do people think short-term vacation rentals should be allowed or not allowed, we do see a lot of consensus around actions that the town could take moving into the future in relation to short-term vacation rentals. And you can see that the strongest levels of agreement center on dealing with problem properties, right? These are sort of the bad apples. And so permanently revoking operation permits from properties that have a history of repeat violations, we have about 9 out of 10 residents support that policy. Issuing mandatory fines for the owner of a short-term vacation rental when there are verified violations and code complaints, right? Here, again, we have about 9 out of 10 supporting that. And then making fines charged for violations more expensive each time a violation occurs at the same property. So starting to escalate this so that if you have a problem property, $150 fine may not matter to them, but as you start to escalate it, it will. So again, a lot of consensus around actions that the town could take into the future as it pertains to regulating short-term vacation rentals. A couple other quick background variables that I think are relevant. We had asked individuals if they've experienced any issues with short-term vacation rentals in their neighborhood. We had also previously asked them, which I don't have the slide here, about whether they have a short-term vacation rental in their neighborhood. We combined the answers of those two questions into this graphic. And so you see a little less than half, 48%, that's the white slice of residents said that they don't know of, they either don't have or they don't know of a short-term vacation rental in their community, in their neighborhood. The remainder said that they did. And for those individuals, when we asked them whether they've experienced any issues, you can see that's pretty evenly split. You had about 23% who said yes, they've had issues with the short-term vacation rental in their neighborhood. You have about 23% who say no, they have one of them in their neighborhood, but they haven't had any issues. For those who said that they had had issues with their short-term vacation rental, we went on to ask them again in an open-ended way to briefly describe the problems that they have experienced. And again, this is just the percentage, among the percentage of those who experienced a problem. What you see here is that these problems tend to cluster. In other words, you have 93% of people who said I had a problem say that they deal with noise. 73% of those who said they've had problems with short-term vacation rentals mentioned partying or bad behavior of the tenants. And then simply having too many people in that house, 61% mentioned some aspect of that as being one of the problems they've experienced with their short-term vacation rentals in their neighborhood, followed by parking problems and then vandalism and theft. So for those who see problems with their short-term vacation rentals, it tends to be multidimensional, right? It's not just one thing, it tends to be a cluster of things together. Okay, so shifting gears here, the town of Yucca Valley, like most municipalities, has a limited budget and probably a much longer list of things it could spend that budget on than it could possibly afford. And so you, like other municipalities, have to set priorities. We like to take the opportunity in this survey to allow residents to weigh in on what types of services or projects or improvements they think should be priority for the town in the future, recognizing that the town doesn't have unlimited resources and can't fund everything. And so, I mentioned that because we don't just come in and ask people, should we do these things? Because you're going to get a lot of yes, 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 yes. We introduce a sense of competition. We ask them for each of the items you see on the left side of that slide to tell us whether it should be a high, medium, or low priority for the town, or if the town shouldn't spend any money on that item, and that not everything can be a high priority. And you see at the top of the list, particularly when you look at the dark blue portion of the bar, which is the percentage who said high priority. Here again, we see this common theme of public works and public safety pop out. So number one priority, maintain and repair local streets, sidewalks, and infrastructure, followed by improving fire protection and emergency medical services, and improving law enforcement and crime prevention services. Those were really the top three funding priorities from your residents' perspectives. As you look down the list, number 4, improving the look and appearance of Yucca Valley through landscaping, graffiti removal, regular maintenance of public spaces. That also had 75% of residents say that's either a high or medium priority. And then as you go down, the priority level changes a little bit. I want to emphasize everything on this list is popular. It's not like providing more recreation facilities and opportunities, which is at the bottom of the scale, is somehow unpopular. We had 60+% of residents say that it's a high or medium priority. It just doesn't rank as high as some of the public safety and public work items above. One of the questions we like to ask each cycle is whether they have had contact with staff from the town of Yucca Valley in the past 12 months. You can see in 2021, that was about 29%, which is statistically significant decrease from 2019. Not surprising with the pandemic. We have seen the same pattern in a lot of cities that during the pandemic, there was just less opportunity and less need in some ways to have interaction with town staff. And so we see a bit of a drop from where we've been in the past in that regard. But among those who had contact with town staff, we asked them to tell us how professional, accessible, and helpful town staff were in their interactions. And you can see there that you have either between 8 and 10 or 9 and 10 respondents say that staff was helpful, professional, and accessible. Shifting gears one more time, we also take an opportunity in the survey to talk about communication. This is an area that has, frankly been a struggle for a lot of public agencies over the last decade, as the sort of the number and diversity of information sources has, grown exponentially. Instead of, all residents sort of turning to the same newspapers, listening to the same radio stations, watching the same TV, we now have this thing called the internet and social media, and every day that web of information sources continues to expand and diversify. And what we found is that that's made it more difficult for municipalities to reach out and connect with residents over time. And so there's been this sort of steady sort of downtick in overall satisfaction with city resident or town resident communication over time. You also, obviously, with the pandemic, that created some additional challenges when it came to communication. And so in 2021, we had 61% of residents say that they were satisfied with the town's efforts to communicate with them. You had about 28% who were dissatisfied, the rest unsure. That actually isn't significantly different than 2019. There's a little bit of a step down, but that difference is not statistically significant. But it's one of these areas that I think any public agency, is about every 6 months needs to kind of look at their budgets and look at what they're doing and decide are we keeping up with this curve of change or not. So to help in that respect, we have a question where we ask respondents to tell us how effective each of the methods of communication you see on the left side of that slide would be for the town to communicate with them. And it's striking that the top 4 responses are all digital, right? Electronic, newsletters and email, smartphone app, town website, text messages. It used to be, I've been in this business for 20 years, even after the internet and even after the advent of social media, you would still find direct mail being the #1 ranked way for a town or a city to communicate with residents. And now that's slipped down to number 4. Number 5. It doesn't mean that it's not important, but it is striking that all these digital channels are actually starting to move up the list. And probably even more striking is if you take this result and you break it down by age and look at seniors, right? So seniors are the group that you'd think, okay, certainly they're going to have direct mail be at the top of their list for how they'd like the town to communicate with them. That's actually not the case anymore. And in fact, in Yucca Valley, both a smartphone app and email/e-newsletters were rated as more effective than direct mail. Direct mail came in 3rd. So we're really seeing kind of a dissolution of what I would call the digital divide based on age, compared to what we've seen in years past. Okay, so I've done a lot of fast talking. I will do a little more here, and then I will pause for any questions that may come from council. So what does all this mean? I do a lot of detail in the report itself and sort of elaborate on what we think these findings mean. And so for the presentation, I'm just going to keep it short. I think the first thing to keep in mind when you're looking at your survey results is where we've been over the last 18 months, right? I mean, we have had a historically difficult period of time with the pandemic, and not just in terms of the stress levels and everything and the shifting needs that creates for residents. It also affects, a municipality's ability and the town's ability to provide services, right? It really changed with the need for social distancing and protecting public health. You need to shut down certain services, move certain services online, do your best to sort of deal with all the curveballs that the pandemic is throwing at you. And considering, everything that's happened over the last 18 months, to find that when you look at resident satisfaction with your overall performance, that it basically tracks very similar to where you were in 2019, that is a success, right? That's a win. And I think it's important to kind of take that perspective when you're looking at these surveys results. Overall, in terms of your top performance, you can see here that not only were, fire protection, prevention, emergency services, and police services viewed as the most important services by a lot of residents, you also were among those that you're viewed as performing the best, along with providing parks, sports fields, and recreation facilities, and special community events. Although we saw a dip in terms of the percentage of respondents who had interacted with town staff over the last year, again, makes sense when you consider the pandemic. We did find that you had, for every that the customer service provided by your staff was well received, and 8 out of 10 of the respondents gave high marks to town staff's accessibility, professionalism, and helpfulness. So, when you look at this as a report card on the town's performance, and in a lot of ways you can, this is a really good report card, especially again considering the challenges that everybody has had to face over the last 18 months. So, like any customer satisfaction survey should not only be about how are we doing today, it should also be forward-looking, right? We should be looking for opportunities in the data to tell us where, to the extent that you have discretionary resources moving forward, where you could focus those efforts to further enhance customer satisfaction. And so those bullet areas under opportunity areas represent your best opportunities in this respect. It isn't because residents are necessarily dissatisfied with your performance in these areas. It's just when you look at how important these things are to residents, as well as how the satisfaction levels for these areas stack up against some of the other areas that you provide, these are the areas that residents see the best opportunity for improvement. And then finally, on short-term vacation rentals, I think sometimes you do surveys and the data comes back a little muddy, right? It's not clear exactly kind of where the public falls on some things. I think at first glance, when you look at these data, it can be a little like, I wonder why we have so much agreement for both positive and negative statements about short-term vacation rentals. And as you dig in, what becomes very clear is just that, your residents recognize the benefits of tourism, right, to your community. They also have a strong respect for private property owners' rights to rent their homes, but they also see the negatives of tourism, in particular with short-term vacation rentals in their neighborhood and town. And so those two things together translate to really broad support for the town taking additional actions to regulate and manage short-term vacation rentals, and in particular focus on those problem properties, right? If you could address those problem properties, sort of the one bad apple and a bunch of good apples, I think that's going to go a long way towards mitigating some of the concerns and heartache that some residents have related to tourism and short-term vacation rentals in town. And so with that, I end my presentation. I welcome questions from council if there are any.
All right, before we do that, we'll open up to the public for any comments. There's quite a bit of information. If you'd like to know a little bit more about the process, or maybe something on that list triggered a question or some thoughts, please share those with us at this time. All right, no one online and no one here. All right. So again, our council repeatedly says we want to know what the community thinks, and these kinds of studies and surveys are so beneficial to us as council members and also to staff. So I appreciate the time and the effort and how well this was put together so we get a true picture of what the community is thinking at large. I had a question on the open-ended questions. How did you handle those? For example, if I had an issue with short-term vacation rental, I might have 3 concerns, not just one. When they had the open-ended questions and they shared maybe the 3 reasons why they weren't interested in, or they had a negative experience or a positive, how did you guys handle that when they had multiple responses and somebody might have just given you one?
So some people would give us multiples on this as far as their reason for either supporting or opposing. And when they gave us a multiple and it was clear it was a multiple, we would put them in both categories. And that's why at the bottom, it's not the percent, it's the percent of respondents that provided opinion, right? And so if you sum those up, they often will add to a little more than 100% because you do have people doing multiples. Obviously, when we get to this question here, this is clearly a lot of multiples, right? When you asked what problems they've experienced.
Right.
If you've got 93% saying noise, 73% saying partying, right? People are hitting on multiple problems, and we would record all those and group them accordingly.
All right, and then you did have a slide, I think it was like a blue in color, it talked about like 7 items or something that could be done as far as improvements and so forth, or funding, was it funding priorities? Yeah, there it is. That's in the report, I seem to miss that particular slide, or is that from some statistics and you made that bar graph or that?
Nope, it is in the report, and let me search real quick. It's in the report. I think it starts on page 41.
On 41, okay.
41 of the report, not the PDF.
Okay, very good, thank you. And then also, as far as the information, you talked about, and I've heard this too, that, vacation rentals are causing a problem with housing shortage and affordability and so forth. We know that's not just here in Yucca Valley. There's a shortage of housing throughout California, and affordability is an issue in almost every community. When we look at vacation rentals and how they impact the rental market and so forth, what is the percentage of vacation rentals versus the entire the housing element? Is it like a 1%, 2% of all homes available or vacation rentals in Yucca Valley?
I would pitch that question to staff. I don't
Okay.
know the
Yeah, I
answer
could
to
jump
that.
in there, Mayor. Last time we looked, our permitted short-term vacation rentals were about a little bit less than 5% of total housing stock.
Okay, so some of the, and it's perception, so it's important to know what the perception is so that perhaps we can address these issues, but also perhaps educate people too on what the real numbers are. And it's wonderful that we have so much input on vacation rentals because that seems to be the hot topic right now, and that's also a concern a lot of us on the council have. For legal counsel, how are we moving forward as far as determining when we can bring those types of issues to the council?
Sure. So yeah, my office, as you know, has been working with the Fair Political Practices Commission to sort through any potential conflicts of interest. And so just one word of caution on tonight's conversation. Until we get that all sorted out on conflicts of interest, just keep your comments on short-term vacation rentals focused on just the data here tonight, not any policy conversations, but we should be able to have a response to you shortly and get you that information, and then you can have the conversation that everybody's desiring to have.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so we don't want to cross the lines and get too into the details of this. All right, I'll bring it over to council members. Again, it's some of it was not surprising. A lot of people are interested in public safety, like we are. A lot of people interested in roads and so on. I noticed in one graph it talked about that the concerts in the park and the 4th of July weren't really that important or a concern, but then on another chart it said it was one of the better things that we do here in the town. So maybe it's not a concern because it's going well, and so it doesn't track as something they necessarily need to keep, but I'm sure if we took those away, all of a sudden it'd be a big issue. So I'll turn it over to the other council for questions. Councilman Dennison.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start. Thank you, Dr. McLarney. Excellent. I really enjoyed the livability study report or the survey report, and I think I had about 100 tabs in there when I was going through and questioning, but your discussion tonight really drilled down and put together a lot of the thought as you assembled that survey and how you presented that survey to the community. So thanks for clearing some of that up. I did have a couple things that I took some notes on. Obviously, strikingly, was enforcement and management of short-term vacation rentals proved to be a pretty strong point. And one thing that I noticed this evening when you were talking through it is that contacts with the town, this is far in the communication category, communications were basically down for this study cycle as comparison to 19. But strangely enough, short-term vacation rental issues were alarmingly up. And so I'm trying to figure out the communication process if we're missing that piece within our town, because you would think with such a striking increase in dissatisfaction with perception of short-term vacation rentals, communications possibly would have went up with the town in that regard. Or are we looking at two different communication ideals that are going on there?
I think you have, on the one hand, reasons for contacting the town, right? So the question that we have here, let me pull the slide so we can see it. So this slide here is about satisfaction with the town's efforts to communicate with residents. So it's town to residents, right? Mm-hmm. And you can see that it's down a little bit, but not a statistically significant change, meaning because these are two randomly selected samples, you're going to expect some amount of difference on the natural anyways, and the difference between 2019 and 2021 isn't large enough for us to say that this is, we're 95% confident that this reflects a change in actual satisfaction. So, but the emphasis here is that it's from the town to residents. When you look at this question, this is the other way, right?
Yes.
This is, did I have a reason to reach out and talk to the town? That is down. Hard part is if it reflects the pandemic, we've seen this in every city that we've been working with during this period of time. And so it's hard. I hear what you're saying, which is, wait a minute, if short-term vacation rentals are more problematic, shouldn't we see an increase in this number perhaps than what we'd seen in the past? But that's being probably more than offset by just the fact that with the pandemic, you have less people participating in programs, less people going to town to interact in some way. And so it's hard to decide, it's hard to tease out the short-term vacation rental boost when
Yes.
overall you have the pandemic pushing it down.
Yeah, I can understand. I see that. And I also appreciate the funding priorities as we looked at enforcement of short-term vacation rentals, but the funding priorities, so covering that on the infrastructure, public safety, and also improvement of our town's look. I appreciate you highlighting those during the report. And that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, any questions? All right, very good. Mr. Drodes, Councilmember Drodes.
Sure. I just want to say thank you. When you talk to residents, you get a mixed bag of comments, and it's nice to have it all organized and to know exactly what people are thinking. So thank you very much, Dr. McClarney.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Lombardo.
Thank you. I found the information really interesting, and there's a lot to dig through there in the future when we start making policy on vacation rentals and that sort of thing. But overall, I'm very pleased with the amount of satisfaction with Yucca Valley as a place to retire, since I'm getting closer to that age. And the livability study shed a lot of light on those aspects of things that people enjoyed about the town of Yucca Valley. I don't know if others experienced this, but during the pandemic, it seemed like I kind of sheltered in place within my own mind as well and didn't reach out to contact things like the town unless there was a problem. So I can see that maybe contacts with the town would drop, but it'll be interesting to see how we can mitigate the problems and still provide good contact with the town folks. It seems that they're satisfied for the most part with what we're doing, and that's a positive for me. So we need to improve, obviously, but I think it's more of getting the communications flowing between the two. We got to find a way to reach more people. People don't seem to be too concerned about reaching out to the town unless they have a specific problem or specific interface with the town where something's going wrong. So I think that's the way it's supposed to be. Government's not really supposed to involve our lives, and but I think communications is the key, and we just got to find a better way to reach more households.
Yeah, I think staff also should be very proud when you see the positive response to our website, because I know we put a lot of effort and energy into that, and also the newsletters going out. So I hope each staff member that's been working on projects see the benefit, that people are seeing it in a positive way, and we're getting some good feedback, because I'm sure the website would not have gotten the good feedback if we kept our old one and it wasn't really user-friendly. Councilmember Dennison.
Yes, Doctor, one follow-up question I forgot to ask is when we look at some of the discussion on short-term vacation rentals versus just long-term rentals, the term affordability comes up quite a bit. And it's kind of hard to measure that. There's no barometer for it based on our community. What is affordability in our town, and what seems to be outside the scope or the reach of renters, long-term renters in the area? Is that something that's looked at?
So we have done that with other cities that have wanted to dive deep on kind of perceptions about affordable housing, right? I think the challenge you have here is it's really a perception challenge. It's hard to say definitively, how much short-term vacation rentals are actually, fueling housing prices in town of Yucca Valley. Obviously, in places that don't have short-term vacation rentals all over the state, housing prices are escalating dramatically, right? So,
yes,
it's hard to say whether that is in fact a cause and effect, but it is clear that there is a perception, right, among residents to some degree that, look, usually a combination of, on the one hand, these short-term vacation rentals are causing problems in our neighborhoods, and secondly, it's also spiking housing prices, right? I will say that it's interesting there's only a few places I've ever looked where I think that it's very clear that, short-term vacation rentals are making it hard to find affordable housing, but they tend to be very small areas like in Encinitas, for example, where you look at a cluster there's a lot of short-term vacation rentals parked right on the beach, right? Because they can get exorbitant prices for those, and it's more lucrative to them to keep them as a short-term vacation rental than a long-term vacation rental. But again, in the grand scheme of things, it's really hard to say beyond just the perception that that's happening, that doesn't truly have an impact on what your housing market would otherwise be.
Thank you for your comment.
All right, as mentioned, it's not a night for policy discussion, so if we're all good with our questions, we'll receive and file and move on. Everyone
Yes,
good with
Mayor.
that?
Only other comment staff would have is that the full report is in the agenda packet. We'll put this somewhere a link to it on our website as well, so the residents can dive deeper if they're interested in finding out a little bit more over what we went today, look at crosstabs, et cetera. That information is available to the public.
Perfect. Thank you so very much. So
Thank you so much.
We'll receive it. Thank you again for your presentation. We'll receive and file the Community Livability Survey Report, and we'll move on to Department Report number 9, Revenue Measure Oversight.
Hello, Mayor and Council. This next item is for the appointment of 2 individuals to the town's Revenue Measure Oversight Commission. Any appointments will be made for terms ending April 1st, 2025. As you are aware, the Commission provides the review of the funds generated by Measure Y and Measure Z and acts as an advisory capacity to the Town Council. In April of this year, the town received resignations from 2 Revenue Measure Oversight Commissioners, creating the vacancies. During a public recruitment period, we received 4 applications from interested individuals. The council received copies of the applications prior to the meeting for review. So the recommendation before you is to consider the applications and appoint 2 applicants to the commission for a term ending April 1st, 2025. Alternately, the council may elect to appoint less than 2 or reject the applications completely and direct the town clerk to renotice the vacancies for another recruitment period. It concludes the staff report, but I do believe we have a couple of our applicants in attendance. They might want to come up and introduce themselves before we open it up to public comment.
All right, very good. Well, again, the Revenue Oversight Commission is a community commission that helps oversee the use of funds from our recent measures. Paul Hoffman was appointed on April of 2017 and served until 2021, and Joanne Keeter also served from April 2017 to 21. So we appreciate both of them for their long service on this particular commission. We also want to thank everyone that applied, and we did open it up for everyone that would like to be here, either remotely or here in person, to come and speak. So we'll go to here in the room. Is there anyone here that would like to speak? Any of our applicants? And then we'll open up to public comments. All right, thank you. Come on forward. Mr. Sasnick, go ahead and introduce yourself, and you'll have time to go ahead and speak on your behalf.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members, staff members, members of the public. My name is Ben Sasnet. I'm known to some of you because I'm the board member at large on the Morongo Basin Transit Authority, and council members sit on that board on a rotating basis. I've been active in the community since I moved here in 1983. I tell people I'm as longevity as the courthouse, which in Joshua Tree, which opened in 1982, and I actually started working there in 1982. I'm retired from the county of San Bernardino, but I'm still active. I'm working part-time, still practicing law at that same courthouse, but I'm only working about half-time right now. And I want to do something for the community, and this is a perfect opportunity. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them.
Very good. We'll save that to the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here in person would like to speak? All right, we'll move to those online.
Yes, we have 2 people that want to speak. They are both the applicants. We have Jose Perez, followed by Carrie DeLuca.
Very good.
Jose, you can unmute your microphone. Did you push it?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, please go right ahead. Thank you for joining us.
No problem. Sorry I couldn't be there in person. I am on my honeymoon right now. So, yeah, I'm somewhere in the middle of Oregon on a really long road trip. Yeah, my name's Jose. I just moved to Yucca Valley a year ago. And, yeah, this whole pandemic and just being stuck at home has really made me want to give back and work for the community more.
Oops.
Fantastic. Are you still with us?
Jose, we lost you for a moment. Can you?
So, the internet connection's a little bitty here.
Oh, we can hear you now.
Part of the town, and that, yeah, I appreciate everything the town has done so far, and I really want to be a part of helping it grow in the future.
Well, thank you very much for introducing yourself. There's no doubt you have a commitment to be on this commission by calling in on your honeymoon. That's quite dedicated individual, so thank you so very much.
No problem.
All right, and our next applicant?
Ms. DeLuca, you may now speak.
Hi, I am Carrie DeLuca. I am a teacher in the Morongo Unified School District. Today was actually my very first day transferring from the junior high to ACE, the Independent Study Program. So I'm excited about that. Like I said in my letter, I'm really excited about these bond measures, and I was when they passed, because they are monies that do get used in our community. And I do feel like it's important to be part of the decision making in those those aspects. Getting a chance to do what I've seen needs to be done or what I would like to see in this community as far as where those funds could go. Having been in this community for the last 13 years, a homeowner for the last 10, teaching in the school district up here for 8 as well. And, I worked in 29. I spent a lot of time in Joshua Tree in the National Park. This place is near and dear to me as a community, and as I see it grow, I would like to be a part of some of the decision making. This is a great committee, I believe, to get started in that, and I would love to work my way up to councilwoman one day. So I just think that this would be a great place for me to start and have more input and say and make a difference in our community.
Well, thank you for joining us remotely. Appreciate that. And is there anyone else online or in person? All right. We'll open up to public comments. Anybody from the public would like to make a comment about the applicants? And if not, we'll bring it back to our council members if they have any other questions or comments. All right, no one from the public at this point. We'll bring it back to our council members. Well, first of all, I thank everyone for applying again. Appreciate that very much. If you have any questions for the applicants, I know you guys have all studied the applications and the backgrounds and so forth. If you have any further questions or any recommendations, we'll move forward with that.
Well, let's see.
I'd just like to say, it's a tough decision, a lot of great applicants. I don't know. It's very hard to do. I think, let's see here. Ms. DeLuca, I think you're very well qualified. I don't know if anybody else would like to, I'd like to nominate Ms. DeLuca.
We have a motion for Ms.
Carrie
DeLuca.
I would make a second on Ms. DeLuca. I appreciate her application, reading through it, and also taking the time to present this evening, too. I think that'd be a good choice.
I like her enthusiasm.
Yeah, and I noticed that she's served on school site council as well, and she also has a real pulse on a variety of community members working for the school district and with different families, so she may be privy to some of the challenges that people have in the community, some of the dealings that we have with those that perhaps are going without certain services or funds or things that are a priority, so I think she'd make a great representative as well. So if there are, we'll just take one at a time. If we have a motion and a second, we'll go ahead and have a roll call vote.
Okay, roll call. Council members Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. Thank you. And I'd like to make a recommendation for William or Bill Sasnett. I've noticed Oversight Committee, Advisory, Morongo Basin Transit Authority, Morongo Unified School District. He's got a plethora of experience and wants to serve in this capacity. And I was very thrilled when I saw that his application came across my desk. So I would like to make a recommendation to appoint Mr. Sasnett.
I agree with that one. I think it's always difficult when you have to narrow it down, but Mr. Sasnett, I know, has been in the community for a really long time, and I would support that nomination.
So we have a motion and a second. If there's no other discussion or other nominations, we'll call a roll call.
Other discussion?
Yeah.
This is what makes it so difficult. There's also Michael Mansell, who I feel is a very well qualified candidate, has volunteered extensively with the town already or in the town's support through the Citizens on Patrol. And I feel that he would be also a great oversight commissioner. And this is what makes it so difficult. Mr. Sasnett also been involved in the community for all the time that I've lived in town here for over 35 years. And knew of his reputation through the courthouse as being solid and a great citizen, and in no way trying to distract from his candidacy. But it's difficult when you have to choose between such well-qualified people. So I would petition for Michael, but I can readily support and will be willing to take the vote at this time.
All right. Duly noted, and I do agree. We have some great applicants, and we appreciate all 4 of them applying. Call for a vote.
Councilmembers Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes.
Mayor, just if I can comment as well, we're always appreciative at a staff level from those that are in the community that are interested in serving. As you recollect, our Revenue Measure Oversight Commission is 7 members. Oftentimes, there are additional vacancies that occur in the future, as well as vacancies both on our Planning, Recreation, Cultural Commission, as well as Planning Commission. So many opportunities for members in the community to serve if they're not successful at one time. Sometimes it takes a couple of different tries and experience in the community to get there. So we're very grateful for their participation.
Don't be discouraged. Continue to be involved.
Yes, and thank you again for all the applicants. Mr. Perez, thank you very much. Hope your significant other was supportive of your applying, and it's very impressive that you called during your honeymoon, so we appreciate that. All right, we will move on to our next item, professional services agreement for communication services.
Mayor and Council, this next item before you is for the approval on a professional services agreement to provide general and special communication services for the town. Town staff conducted a search for firms that would best represent the town of Yucca Valley for public affairs, marketing, and general information dissemination. Tripepi Smith was the front runner when looking for an agency that would be easy to work with and understands the unique communication needs of a public agency. Tripepi Smith's work with dozens of other public agencies allows for the familiarization of known issues common to local government, the timeliness of information dissemination, and the importance of stakeholder engagement. Town staff approached other agencies that have engaged Tripepi Smith for similar retained services and received very high responses for professionalism and the unique ability to serve as an extension of town staff to provide communication and outreach services. So with us this evening online is Cameron Grimm and John Barralone. They're directors for Tripepi Smith. And they're going to be introducing their company and to provide an overview of their scope of services they're proposing for the town.
Hi, can everyone hear me? This is Cameron.
Yes, thank you, we can.
Perfect. Well, Honorable Mayor, council members, thank you for your time this evening and for the opportunity to introduce myself and provide some background information on our firm, Tripepi Smith. As mentioned, I have my colleague, John Barralone. He's also a director in the firm on this call as well to help field any questions you may have. Well, I've had the pleasure of working with the town on past communication pieces, including a mailer and an anniversary logo redesign. So I'm looking forward to telling you more about the services our firm provides. You have the next slide. So Tripepi Smith is a marketing, technology, and public affairs firm. Our clients are primarily local governments and public agencies throughout California. We also have clients in the state of Washington and the state of New Mexico. Some of the work we provide to our clients includes graphic design, marketing plans, media relations, strategic messaging, social media management, crisis communication, and community engagement. So as a full service marketing and creative services firm, we deliver content and design tailored for public agencies. Can I have the next slide? So Tripepi Smith has been working with public agencies since 2002. Our current roster consists of 33 team members, and we're led by our co-founder and CFO, Nicole Tripepi Smith, the Tripepi of Tripepi Smith. She's a second generation civic affairs professional, as her father was a city manager for 28 years. And our co-founder and president, writer Todd Smith, who brings over a decade of public agency marketing and communications experience. So our team's skills and experience range from marketing strategists, government affairs experts, and then we have a team of creative professionals that generate websites, branding, design, social media, photo, and video work. We're certified in numerous social media and digital platforms such as Facebook Blueprint, Google AdWords, Constant Contact, and Hootsuite. So no other public affairs firm in California, at least that we can find, has this number of certifications. So it showcases our, I think, depth and knowledge on these various platforms. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So having these different skill levels and expertise all across our team means that we can call on our teammates as needed to get their input and experience, and we can tell a complete story across all mediums, all within our one team. So it's anticipated that I would serve as the team lead for this proposed engagement, and that would handle project management, logistics, creative direction for writing and design. And I would also have junior business analyst Skylar Addison on my team, who would take on day-to-day content production. So that would mean drafting social media posts, press releases, and articles. And we can also call on graphic designer Sarah Madsen as needed to assist with those projects. And she's the same designer who I mentioned before did the mailer and the anniversary logo. Okay, go to the next slide. So Tripeppi Smith has been selected to work with over 100 public agencies over the past few years to help with communications and outreach needs. On this slide, you'll see some of our current clients. Currently, I lead accounts for the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge, the city of Indian Wells, and I also do redistricting outreach work for the city of Marina. Work in these cities includes project management. I do a lot of writing articles, press releases, and newsletters. I've been with the firm since 2018. In addition to client work, I also lead our video production team. I have over a decade of experience in video editing and animation. And as an English major, I enjoy storytelling in all the forms it can take. So this job is pretty much the perfect fit for me. Okay, next slide. So here's the scope of work that we propose to the town after discussing with town staff what their needs are. So this would include bi-weekly check-in calls. So this would help us coordinate our efforts with town staff, sustain momentum on projects, and drive content planning for various communication channels. Just because this is our kind of regular check-in call, this is not the only time you will hear from us. All of our numbers are mobile phone numbers, and we're always available to our clients. And we often have a saying that the call you get off hours is the one call you want to answer because something has gone wrong. So we're always available. We also would provide a monthly dashboard report. So this would be a basic summary of data and metrics related to town-controlled social media platforms. This helps us evaluate our success and serves as a mechanism for insights if we need to change the course of a plan or a strategy moving forward. Our quarterly communications planning sessions is where we meet with key staff to identify opportunities and wins to celebrate in the next 6 to 12 months. It breaks down silos between departments. We kind of all get together and talk about what we want the town to know about in the next year. This is all documented into an editorial calendar, and then that serves as a roadmap for us to track communication opportunities moving forward. We would also take over the bi-monthly digital newsletter, formatting and putting articles into that, which leads into the next point about up to 3 articles, press releases, and statements per month. So this would ensure the town has the resources to get stories written and news releases distributed as needed, and then we could repurpose those for social media and the newsletter as needed. Social media management would include content creation, creating graphics that would go along with posts, scheduling posts, monitoring for comments, for messages to the inbox to make sure that we're being responsive to people who have questions. It would also include optimizing posts. So if there was something very important that we wanted to distribute over social, we could set up boosted posts geo-targeted to residents, and we're more than capable of helping set those up. The last thing it would include is up to 2 hours per month of website content updates. So that would be at the town's direction, but Trip Epi Smith staff would also offer suggestions on improvements as needed. And then the next slide is just open up for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Cameron. Council, if I could also just provide you a little bit more insight as to our decision process moving forward. I think some of this ties in very closely to the community livability survey and our measurement of communication efforts, how successful we are, areas that we're strong in, areas that we can improve in. And if you think about, for example, the kind of top 4 ways that Dr. McClarney identified how people communicate, you can see that traditional methods of communication have changed. And so we need to make sure that we're cognizant of that we can recognize how we can best communicate with our residents. Oftentimes it's less about the resident hearing exactly what they want to hear versus being communicated with and understanding why things are happening. And so that's one of our objectives with bringing on Trip Epi Smith. We debated internally whether this might be something better with a full-time staff member or contract service. As typically as a contract town, we like to engage services where we can maximize value, and that means bringing in various types of talent. So not only do you have a writing talent here, you have a creative talent, you have social media talent, you have a multitude of talents that are beyond just a single individual person. And so we feel very comfortable with Trip Epi Smith. This is proposed as a retainer engagement. So the scope of services that was identified is services that are provided in the retainer. There's nothing that would prohibit us from expanding those services if we need to at any given time. So hopefully that provides you a little bit more background on the thought process behind the recommendation for you this evening. I'd be happy to answer further questions after public comment.
Great. We're opening it up to public comment. Professional service agreement for communication services. All right, we'll bring it back to our council. With the price tag, my question is that, are we going to get some type of report on, are we using all the services provided? In other words, you can provide or you can purchase a group of services, but you don't take advantage, or staff so busy they don't take advantage of all those services that are provided. How are we going to monitor we get a return on our investment as far as using those?
Sure. One of the things that we include in our monthly dashboard report is keeping track of how many posts we are putting up per month, how many stories are being written per month, how many press releases are going out. So that keeps track every month. And if, you start to see that, this area isn't using very much and maybe we need more help in another area, we'd be more than happy to revise and revisit as needed. But every month you will get a report on the work that's being done.
And I'm assuming you've already sort of seen and evaluated what we're doing presently in our website and those types of things?
We have in an informal way, but that would be one of the first things we would do is we would start discussing with staff, kind of flipping over rocks, finding out who controls what, getting access to all the different platforms. And then we would go from there with our kickoff meeting to start kind of planning our strategy.
Okay, and with this evaluation of what we're doing presently and what we need to do in the future, you would be able to allow us or let us know if we're shorthanded on staff and we need additional staff to be able to provide all the services?
Can you repeat the question? Just that if we still thought through the scope of services that you weren't meeting all the needs of the town?
Yeah, if you're looking at what we're doing and then what you can provide, I guess that's a question that staff would be able to evaluate at the end. It's more of a staff question, I guess. So I think you've answered my question as far as how you monitor the usages that we're having, and I like the idea that you're calling in and touching bases with staff. So we'll see how this goes. I'm just a little bit concerned about the price tag, and like you said, if we're looking at expanding staff, that's a staff position, but as Curtis mentioned, you provide a multitude of skill sets where one person might have 2 or 3, but not all of them. So I'm open to the other council members' input, but I appreciate the presentation tonight. Yeah, Councilmember Rhodes?
I just have one question, Cameron. Website content updates, 2 hours a month. What exactly is that? What would you be doing, or do you have any idea?
Sure. Some of the things we do for our other clients are, say we wrote a news article, we would publish that to the website. If there's a press release that needs publishing, if there's images that we want to update that need to get swapped out, any just kind of general maintenance. Even another thing that comes to mind is for a client recently, they wanted a specific they used Constant Contact for their crime blotter, but they didn't have a very easy way of having people sign up for that form. So we created a form that people could sign up directly for the crime blotter and added it to their public safety website. So anything to kind of improve and maintain and update the website as needed. And I know that John has one more thing he wanted to add here.
There we go. Check 1, check 2.
Yeah.
Yep, you're good.
Excellent. So one thing I will note is we recognize that you are using the Granicus platform for your website, the content management system. We're very familiar with that platform, even back before they were bought out, when they used to go by Vision Internet. So we have years of experience in the back end of the exact content management system you're using. We will often come in and speak to city staff and help them realize there are features they may not be using. For example, friendly URL redirects so that you don't have to have a long, unmemorable URL for things like marketing campaigns. You can make something nice and short. And we have the ability to look under the hood and help maximize how you're using your entire website, not just looking at the front-facing content that your audience sees.
I have one more question. Going back to the website content update, 2 hours a month, does that include creating content, or is it the 2 hours just working on uploading content that we have created? Or is it a little of both? What's your experience with that?
That just includes uploading and maintaining content. So things we do like that are other parts of the scope, like the writing of articles, that doesn't have a time limit and isn't part of the 2 hours of website maintenance work.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Lombardo.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm in favor of moving forward with this. I think that, like was mentioned, the ability to have a company that has a lot of different avenues, people specializing in certain things, would be far superior over having a full-time employee with just one limited scope of expertise. And so I see great advantage to this. My concern a little bit would be about, and I see the trend is moving in the direction that this will become more and more important to us in the future as our population is younger, more computerized folk, but we still have a pretty high segment of our community that is older and may not be as computer savvy. And I wonder, is there ways that we can reach those people as well and bring them on board? Is there a way that we can recruit more of our not as active computerized, non-computerized people to this, to get involved in the website and the dissemination of information through this way? Would like a printed newsletter be a possibility in some ways to be added to be mailed out to those that don't really use the computer? Or I guess my question would be, if we find that it's not as effective as we would want, are there special ways that we can engage those that may not be as fluent on the computer?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important to be present on a lot of different platforms because you're reaching different audiences on the different platforms. One thing about our contract is that through our retainer agreement, you then have access to reduced ad hoc rates. So if we do something outside of our scope, like we do a mailer or we do something that is a flyer, something that's more print material, there's a discount on those services. So that's something we can explore as well. It seems like from the survey that even older demographics in the town are find social media and the website very appealing. So that's where our dashboard reports will be very helpful in helping us determine if we're meeting our goals, if we're getting the reach we want, or if we need to explore other means as well.
Okay, very good. Do we have metrics on what an acceptable reach into the public is as far as percentage of the population receiving and acknowledging receipt of information from the town? Like in your other experiences, this is another reason why it's good to have a company that kind of specializes in this. We're not the only place that you've worked, and so you have it's usually 25% of the population will be computer literate and able to communicate with us in this way. What is an acceptable reach into the public as far as communication on a regular basis?
And Cameron, I can jump in here. That is an excellent question to ask, especially because, as you pointed out, we've worked with so many different public agencies and we have seen a very wide range in terms of, let's take Facebook as a very specific example. We can use Facebook's advertising tools to tell how many different Facebook users there are within the city, and then compare that to the number of users within the city who are following your Facebook page. If we're looking at that one specific metric as an apples to apples comparison across other public agency clients we work with, typically we're seeing around 10 to 20% of the Facebook users within your city are engaged or following your Facebook page. Now, you can extrapolate that out across your different platforms. You'd probably find that to be a pretty similar percentage level on other digital platforms as well. One thing I'll note, even though Trepeppy Smith loves digital media and all of the pros that it offers, we're able to measure our exact reach, our exact engagement levels. We are also suffering a little bit because we're subject to the algorithms of things like Facebook and Instagram, where they don't want to show every single post that we create to all of the people that follow our pages, based on their own reasoning for what Facebook users should be seeing. So that is one of the reasons, going back to what Cameron mentioned earlier, we take a bit of a shotgun approach in terms of using as many different platforms as possible to get the content out and try and reach as many people as possible, because we recognize, using the tools that are available to us, it's impossible to get 100% of the people to see everything we're putting out.
Okay, thank you. I think you answered my question. Thank you.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Yes, well, I think we heard earlier tonight that the electronic digital media is the priority, and that's the way we can reach most of the people. I really like this approach. I like everything about it. I have a couple of questions. The press releases, I think it said 2 or 3 press releases a month. Are those like feature stories, or what are those typically? Because they're probably not. We have a dog obedience class coming up or something. They're probably something more significant than that.
Sure, they're normally just one-page reports of anything that we want to get out to the media. So we would take a look at the town's current media distribution list and figure out if we want to build that out. They're more formal releases. If you find that maybe there's not that many news releases you want to use in a month, that's why the engagement is kind of flexible. So if you didn't want to do any press releases that month because there's not that much that you want to distribute to the media, you can always then write 3 articles instead, so that you're filling out content for that digital newsletter. So it's whatever is going on in the town that month that you would like to just send out to your constituents.
Okay, and we might not always know what the highest priorities are, so I assume you have experience or ways of triggering things down the road that are important or things that we might be overlooking. I guess that would happen in those conferences. You could just say yes to that, I guess, but.
Yes, that happens in our content planning meetings, and also things come up, maybe something unexpected comes up. We would always hear about that on our week or our biweekly check-in calls, and then of course, just anytime you would need us, you could reach out.
Well, what about emergencies? Say we had another earthquake here. Do you guys amp up and really jump in there and help us a lot? Or have you done that? Is that something that you have had experience with?
Yes, definitely. That is something we can help you with. We've done crisis communications. One thing that comes to mind for me is in the city of La Cañada Flint Ridge. They're a high fire risk area. So whenever there's fires nearby, we are all hands on deck, putting things out on social, telling people how to sign up for Nixle or emergency alerts, telling people how to get an emergency kit ready. We're also proactive about that messaging just in general, but of course it gets more serious as something imminent is happening. And in the city of Indian Wells, one thing that comes to mind is during the COVID-19 pandemic, the BNP Paribas Open was the first major sporting event that was canceled due to the pandemic. And I think it was a day or two before the event was to take place that they decided to cancel. So that was definitely an after hours call. We wrote a press release, we got it out on social, came up with a plan, gave council talking points. So we are there for you in those times of crisis, for sure.
And what about helping us prep for a press conference in those instances, so that when the camera's on and a public official is in front of the camera, that they know what to say? Do you help with that?
Yes, we write talking points with council. I think, John, maybe you can speak to this more, maybe with American Canyon.
Yes, and in fact, I was thinking American Canyon was another example of a crisis communications client that we have. In terms of the logistics of how that works, we do regular communication support with them. They also have a separate contract for us, a $5,000 bucket to use for crisis communications on nights, weekends, weekdays, anytime they need to get a hold of us through a text chain, a WhatsApp chain, email, we're there ready for them. In terms of your other question for preparation for media inquiries and press conferences, being on the radio, et cetera, one example I'll point to is with the city of Santa Ana. A few years ago, they had some very high profile activity going on around clearing out a civic center that had become a very large homeless encampment. They did a sweep in a single day after lots of advance notice to clear that all out. It was all hands on deck in terms of multiple news outlets being there, especially in Spanish language as well. So what we did to help prep the city manager's office is identified a single spokesperson who was going to be on camera, worked with them on set talking points, worked with them on translating that into Spanish for those media outlets that were going to need it. And then we were on hand, off camera, providing that moral support on site for them, not necessarily interrupting them as they went, but just making sure that we knew we were with them every step of the way.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. One last question. I assume mailers, when you do mailers, that triggers Additional cost, I mean, what other services trigger additional costs that we could look at or expect?
Things outside of our scope would be things like graphic design, right? Like a mailer. So that would also incur external costs like print and mail costs. Video work would be outside of our scope of work, like a stock photo shoot. So any photography work, we have a lot of photographers on our team, things of that nature. Anything else come to mind for you, John?
No, I'd say those are the major ones that clients usually leverage us for. Like we mentioned, we are a one-stop shop, so we do have those specialties in-house. One thing I will note is the current proposal and the current retainer is based off of our prior conversations with staff. It may very well be the case that we get a few months in and we recognize that there needs to be some baseline of, let's say, graphic design support, a certain number of hours per month, that the city would like to leverage instead of XYZ deliverable. We're pretty flexible if we need to make those kinds of changes, but those first few months of engagement will help us, as Cameron said, flip over those rocks and determine what city staff really needs.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation so far. I'm pretty excited about this. The council and staff has worked hard over the last few years to improve our network, the hardware and the software we use. And I'm glad to hear that you're familiar with our web platform that we're using to build. We've worked really hard to kind of build a branding and a theme that crossed all of our different message systems and platforms. And it sounds like that is really in your wheelhouse, and I appreciate your discussion on emergency dissemination, also, broadcasting of messaging. I look forward to seeing some of the content and how it's put out there, and to see that it, you said a little bit about graphic designing, so we can always use a little bit of tuning to get a little more modern in our theming and our message design, to make it a little bit of brevity, but also drill down available, but to get things out there quickly. And yeah, so far, I really like what I've read about your company, and I appreciate your information tonight. Thank you.
All right.
Mayor, just a couple final comments. This is a retainer, so the entry and exit's relatively easy through the retainer agreement. And then lastly, to expound on the financials, the proposed services are $78,000 annually. Right now, our estimate is about half of that will be funded out of the general fund, about 25% out of Measure Y, and about 25% out of Measure Z as well.
All right. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Cameron and John. You sold me, so thank you very much for the presentation tonight. Looking for a motion, possible second. We have a motion from Councilmember Lombardo
And then,
and Mayor Pro Tem second.
Councilmembers Dennison,
yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. Thank you again for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. We look forward to working with you and your team.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We're going to move on to Department Report 11, Urgency Ordinance, Sign Regulations, Ordinance number 156, Murals.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The recommended action before you this evening is that the Town Council adopts the urgency ordinance that is included in your packet this evening. As the Council is aware, you discussed these issues as well as other sign code-related issues back in June of 2019. And at the end of that meeting, you provided direction to the Planning Commission as well as staff. Within your packet are copies of records of the Planning Commission's dialogue, as well as the outline of some of their desired changes to specifically the mural portion of the town's sign regulations. As a refresher, the town sign code talks about how many murals are allowed, talks about not allowing advertising value or advertisement value, also has a design theme. And there are a number of issues across the board that are worthy of consideration in the near future. There's discussion within your ordinance about how that area is calculated, how large they can be, color schemes, and permitting processes. Permitting processes resting with the Planning Commission. And then finally, there are required findings in order for those murals to be approved. Recently, the town received, and this is one application that was received for building in Old Town. You can see it's a little bit different than some of the types of murals that have been proposed in the past. Through discussions with town staff, this was converted into a sign application and is no longer a mural. This is what the sign application looks like now and will be going to the Planning Commission as a sign permit. This is the second and most recent mural application that was received by the town. I think most of the council members, if not all, are probably aware of the fact that these were painted on minimum of 3 sides of this building without benefit of application being filed with the town or permit being issued. This permit has recently been filed for a mural on this site. Just a little bit of history as we go, and this is just one more portion of the mural that's been installed on this building. A little bit of history. We remember Chet's and the Maytag murals. We remember some of the former murals, the Spaceman, which turned into a little bit of different type of mural approach, as well as Acme 5 and what they had installed. As you can see, all of these are different. They bring different artistic ideas to the table for consideration. And as such, therefore, the recommendation this evening for the moratorium. This ties into the Town Council Strategic Plan, Community Objective number 13, related to the appearance of Highways 62 and 247 as the murals are limited to your commercial areas. The recommended action is that the Town Council adopts the urgency ordinance. This urgency ordinance is good for 45 days, and that follows state law. State law sets forth the parameters of how moratoriums are implemented. The second phase we anticipate would be returned to the council at your meeting of October 5th, where you would continue that moratorium for a period of 10 months and 15 days, I believe. And at that meeting, staff would recommend that the council have the opportunity to discuss some specifics related to murals and then provide direction as to how you'd like to see the process move forward, whether that be some form of committee, whether it goes directly to the Planning Commission with policy direction from the Town Council, how you would like that structure formatted, as well as what those issues are that you would like to see carried out as a part of that process. So the recommended action this evening is to put in place the moratorium, which is not designed to prohibit anything, but it's designed to give the Town Council, the Planning Commission, and the community the opportunity and a time frame to talk about the importance of this topic, how it does have an impact upon the appearance of our commercial corridors, and to revise those regulations as deemed appropriate, ultimately by the Town Council. That concludes the staff presentation. We'd be happy to answer questions following public comment.
Thank you, staff. Public comment on our mural topic. Thank you. Come on forward. Give us your name, place of residence.
Hello, my name is Ed Kiesling, and I'm a Yucca Valley resident. I'm also chairman of the Park Recreation and Culture Commission, and so far we have not been at all involved in this discussion of the cultural aspects of murals and public works, and I think that before a decision is made, that we should have the opportunity to get involved and to help with designing what the policy is going to be, and try and do some good for the community.
Thank you, sir. Anyone online or here in the room would like to speak? You're next going to get sore with saying no, there's no one online. All right, we'll bring it back to our council. My question is on the Mojave Flea trading post. They changed it to more of going through the sign process?
Yes,
so
sir,
we're
that's
not going to stop that from moving forward if that still will be looked at and reviewed?
That is correct.
Okay. And as far as the murals and so forth, I know that we've been asking for this to be looked at for a while. I personally really miss the Spaceman. You know, I thought that was a great addition, and some of the murals I've seen have been fantastic. I do know that we have to look at what is considered a sign, what's considered a mural. Perhaps we need to look at our sign ordinance at the same time, because there's some validity to being able to advertise, and I see a lot of creativity, so I don't want to squash that. But I think maybe taking 45 days to set aside some time for us to perhaps getting the Park and Recreation and Cultural Commission involved and get some more input would probably be appropriate, since we're getting applicants. And some of those applicants don't meet our current code, so we wouldn't be able to probably approve those anyway until we take a look at our policies. So I'm in favor of maybe making that 45-day time to look at it. I'm a little concerned about how much we extend it when we have that opportunity, but I guess we're going to discuss that at a later date.
Yeah, I would agree. We've been discussing this item for quite a while. It's been brought forward, and I appreciate staff's work on it. I'm looking forward to October so we can continue to move this item forward. I think momentum is important in this. It's important in the community. As we heard from other members of the community, it's important that we get as many people on board and kind of resolve this matter for them, and that we can move forward. So thank you.
Councilmember Lombardo?
I'm also interested in this and moving it forward. Do we have a procedure where we can involve the Park Recreation Department in this? Do we have like a combined meeting thing, or do we get representatives, have them make a committee that joins the Planning Commission? How is that? Is there a process set for this?
That's a policy discussion that the council can have at a future date. In your current structure, the Planning Commission is the review authority. So that was the structure that was created by the prior town council in review of these matters. Depending upon what direction the council desires to go with murals, in terms of if you allow them at all, what type of criteria or program is going to be put in place should really be the guiding factor of who's involved in the review authority.
Okay.
So the council can answer that question ultimately once you've designed that program for murals, who the review authority is, or is there an advisory role? How does that structure work? I think that's a future conversation, and that's fully within the council's authority.
Very good. Because I do see murals as part of a cultural thing to help establish some kind of continuity to our community or to enhance the cultural aspect. So I'm interested in looking forward into that discussion.
Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
I agree with, actually, I'd like to ask a question. Is the Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Commission still overseeing a public art advisory committee, or is that still in place, or still part of their function? There was at one point.
So, based upon some recent conversations that I've had with Sue, the PRCC is scheduled to talk about public art and how that fits in. So there may be some dialogue that comes back to the council, potentially, that ties together murals into that public art component, and therefore the PRCC may have a very strong role. For example, some communities, some cities, actually take a degree on a sliding scale of ownership in murals that are on private property, but the cities have a financial interest in those in some manner, shape, or form, or an ownership interest, which actually gives the city the control over the murals. to make sure that they fit into that mural program. That could easily be something that ties into the PRCC and their review with public art. So that's fully open as an option. I don't know if Sue and I had this conversation probably 8 months ago or 12 months ago, so I don't know if she wants to throw any more in on that portion of it, but that was our most recent conversation.
Thank you.
I don't really have a lot to add other than, yes, it's on the PRCC's agenda to address the public art policy in general. And they did express an interest some time ago when murals just started at the Planning Commission to be a part of the conversation, as the chair has mentioned.
Okay, thank you. Well, it does seem like a good fit. It kind of seems like a public art component, the murals. And I'm not really in favor of making it too complicated. I agree with Councilmember Dennison that I'd like to kind of expedite, the whole conversation and let people know where we stand. And I totally embrace the creativity and the organic thing that's happened, especially in the Old Town area. I think for the most part, that's been pretty tasteful and and kind of benefits the community that we have that. And so I really, the momentum that Rick was talking about, I think that's important. So I would be in favor of expediting this. And yeah, I'm good with the moratorium. I just, would like to see us not drag it out.
Yeah, one question I have is on the moratorium. It does not mean that we are painting over, eliminating, fining anyone at this point. We're just going to hold still. And I don't think the moratorium is the problem in some ways, because people were putting up murals without the permits. And so that doesn't solve that issue, where they just go ahead and do whatever they want and then try to get a permit after the fact. So again, like I said, there's some benefits for being able to advertise, and obviously there's a benefit of having it done tastefully and with art. So we'll maybe, like I said, we'll have to look at perhaps a statute within the sign ordinance where you have to pay an exorbitant price for a mural that includes advertising. I don't know, that has to go through the process. I have no idea. And then we always have the deals with freedom of expression and speech and all those things. We don't want to stifle creativity, but we also want to make sure that we have some order in how we're moving forward. So I did see, like they said in the survey, a lot of people are very interested in the town's appearance, especially up and down the corridor. And like I said, some of these new businesses have made Old Town look a lot more pleasant, and a lot more tourists are stopping. And thankfully, to the foresight of the town council and staff, we have sidewalks in Old Town where people are walking from business to business, where before they weren't even getting out of a car. If they did, they got out of a car for one shop and they got back in a car because there wasn't a sidewalk to walk on. So we want to help the Old Town residents, the Old Town businesses. We also want to make sure we have a very nice corridor for everyone, and we have a lot of work to do in those areas. So I'm in favor of the 45-day adoption of the moratorium, so we can look at this issue in a lot more detail. I'll make that motion.
One question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Does this mural ordinance only involve the corridor, Highway 62, or does it include buildings that might be on ancillaries like Yucca Trail and
It's
others?
townwide.
47.
So anyone who is, any property that is eligible for a mural, be it on the highway or off the highway, in that commercial land use district or commercial zoning district, this urgency ordinance is applicable.
Okay. And murals on private residence, like you want to decorate your garage wall with a desert scene, that's not a problem at this time? Or did I just open a can of worms?
You opened a jumbo-sized can of worms, yes, sir.
Can we erase that film?
That's a completely different issue and a completely different set of regulations. So what's before the council this evening are murals under the sign code, which are limited to commercial properties.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'll have to talk to you privately later.
And Mayor, you made the motion, I'd second.
We have a motion. Councilmember Dennison made a second.
I'd like to read the title of the ordinance into
Thank
the
you.
record before we take roll. An interim urgency ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yucca Valley adopting a 45-day moratorium on the installation of wall murals within the Town of Yucca Valley.
Very good.
Roll call. Council members Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. All right. We're moving forward.
Yay.
A 5-year capital improvement program.
Oh, man.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. We have a presentation today for the 5-year capital improvement program, fiscal year 21-22 through fiscal year 25-26. Can you hear me? The recommendation in front of you is, as recommended by the Planning Commission, that the Town Council finds that the capital improvement program is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act according to sections 15378B4 and section 15061B3. The capital improvement program is not a project, therefore there is no possible effect on the environment, and the capital improvement program does not result in a commitment to any specific projects. Part of this recommendation is that it recommends that the Town Council adopt the 5-year capital improvement program for the fiscal years 21-22 through fiscal years 25-26. The capital improvement program is a planning tool. It is a guide for the allocation of resources for public infrastructure. It is a short-term 5-year plan which identifies capital projects, provides planning schedule, and identifies the options for financing the program. It's also a document that identifies the recommended allocation of the town limited resources for capital projects through those fiscal years. The existing infrastructure and analysis and consideration is that the 5-year CIP implements general plan goals, policies, and programs, considers the impact of the HDWD wastewater project, the impact that it has on the town road maintenance program in the next 10 years, and considers parks and recreation facilities, public facilities, and town-owned properties. All those projects that are included in the CIP are funded with local and grant funds. We can see in the 10-year cash flow model for a street maintenance program that this staff prepared this program and this cash flow and includes all town projects with local and grant funding available, preventive maintenance for the town's road system every 5 to 6 years, and projects program with SBCTA to be funded within the next 10 years. The cash flow shows that a negative balance will be happening between fiscal year 2029 and 2030 if additional fund is not included to maintain the roads. So the capital improvement program, the policy framework that we used was to maintain new roads in good or better condition, to limit the spending of resources in road reconstructions in future areas where HDWD is building the wastewater collection system, to continue to monitor HDWD project delivery so we can set the range of dates for additional maintenance programs, limited maintenance road work schedule over the next 3 years. So this is likely to result in neighborhood concern from sewer phase 2 neighborhoods. It does not include any dirt roads, or the roads are not planned to be identified or to be brought into the town maintenance road system. The cash flow model, as we show it in the last picture, shows a negative balance in 2029-2030 if no additional financial resources are identified. Includes the phase work of the former library site on several years. There is no major renovations for the senior center, and grant funds are included for proposed Prop 68, the Aquatics and Recreation Center. So the capital project categories are street and highways, park and recreation, public facilities, and town-owned properties. The funding, they are all, the funding for street and highways, parks and recreation, public facilities, and town-owned properties are all special revenue funds, and you can see that Measure Y is on street and highways, on street, parks, recreation, and facilities. Last year, 2021, we did not use Measure Y funding on our street maintenance program. The street and highway projects, we have the Town of Yucca Valley Local Road Safety Plan that is in progress right now, Onaga Trail improvements, and Little League Drive pedestrian improvements, all funded with local funds and ATP funds. We have the town-wide crack seal and slurry seal programs, and then we have Palm Avenue improvements with Prop 68, and then for the fiscal years 23 and 24, we expect crack seal on the package A of the HDWD sewer project, the phase 1, and crack seal and slurry seal for package C on the HDWD project. Then for fiscal year 24 and 25 and 25-26, California State Route 62, the widening from Sage to Airway, and major arterial and collector crack seals through 25-26. This is a project on Onaga Trail improvements, construction of sidewalks, curb gutter, handicap ramps, and driveway approaches from a common trail to Sage Avenue. Little League Drive, construction of sidewalk, handicap ramps, driveway approaches, crosswalk, installation of bike route signs from Palm Avenue to Sage Avenue. These are the fiscal year 21-22 town-wide crack seal program that include major arterials and collector and local residential roads, focusing on the major arterials that could not do the crack seal last year, and the residential areas that we see like they are going to be the ones that are more affected due to the HWD project. Same thing with the town-wide slurry seal. And in parks and recreations, the projects are the Aquatic and Recreation Center North Park improvements that are currently done with CDBG funds and is currently on the design phase. The public facilities that we have is the senior center kitchen upgrades funded with CDBG COVID-19 funds, and the town-owned properties is the town hall consolidation project. This is the Aquatic and Recreation Center, community outreach, and what was proposed by LPA study. This is the 30% submittal of the North Park Improvement Project. We are expecting to receive next week the 60%, so we are really close to have this project moving forward. This is a draft of the improvements at the senior center kitchen upgrades, including refrigerator, including freezer areas, and including some drainage and AC improvements. And the town hall consolidation project, this is a picture. We are in the study right now session of how this project could move forward. So the 5-year total allocation per fiscal year, you can see that we have probably $5.3 million in 21-22. That includes streets, parks, public facilities, and town-owned properties. In the fiscal year 22-23, we have 11 millions. That's the big part is including with Prop 68 in Parks and Recreation. In the fiscal year 23-24, we have 10 millions. Again, Prop 68 is due by April or May of 2024. So the fiscal year 24-25 is reduced only to streets and highways, and the same thing with 2 millions. And then the fiscal year 25-26 is 1.8 millions on street and highways, only the projects that are considered. So again, the recommendation that we have in front of you is to find that the capital improvement program is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act according to the section 15378B4 and the section 15061B3. The capital improvement program is not a project, so there is no possibility of significant effect on the environment from the program. And the CIP does not result in a commitment to any specific projects. And also recommends that the Town Council adopt the 5-year capital improvement program for the fiscal year 21-22 through 25-26. That concludes my report, and I will be glad to answer any questions following public comments.
Mayor and Council, just a couple other comments. As Armando mentioned, in 2021, there were no Measure Y expenditures on the road program. That was for a couple specific reasons. Number one, the town had other sufficient revenues for that one particular year. And number two, that was during COVID, and we wanted to monitor very carefully what the town's overall revenues were doing in comparison to services that needed to be provided, and Measure Y is a very important part of that. Tied into while there were no Measure Y funds expended on roads last year, the council has put $1 million of Measure Y into road work for 21-22. So again, we monitored what COVID brought. Our other road revenues were sufficient, and we're continuing to move forward with those infrastructure priorities as approved by the council. One of the items that Armando mentioned is working with SBCTA at the staff level. We've been working with SBCTA on the 10-year delivery plan for federal and state grant resources that are coming to the Morongo Basin. I think the council heard tonight the community's concerns through that survey about traffic congestion. That's focused on Highway 62. And the town, in our work with SBCTA, has been emphasizing the need to address Highway 62, and we anticipate in the near future some activities coming forward. It takes a number of years to develop a project on the highway, from project reports, project study reports, project advancement, environmental documents, utility relocations. All of those things combined can take 5-6 years. And in our timeline, we would hope to be actually under construction in 5 or 6 years on the first phase of widening of Highway 62. So we just mentioned that that is ongoing and definitely a necessity based upon the traffic volumes that we're seeing in this community. And then finally, the numbers that Armando presented to you do not include if the town council chooses to provide funding for additional improvements as part of Prop 68. It does not include if the grant applications that Sue and her staff spent so much time developing, as well as with outside consultants, if any of those come through, that will add to the financial resources that become a part of your 5-year CIP. So just wanted to mention a few of those things. It's exciting to see those projects moving forward, the type of projects that are being delivered, and thank you to Armando and his staff for getting this pulled together. That concludes the staff's comments. Be happy to answer any questions following public comment.
Anyone in the public who would like to speak on this item? All right, we'll bring it back to the council. Recommendations from the Planning Commission is that the project is exempt from CEQA, and that the recommendation is that town council adopts the 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2001, 2022 through 2025-26. Comments or motions?
I'll move the item.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
And we have a second. Any further discussion?
I understand that the thing that we're evaluating now is kind of projects in the future, and it defines the funding that's heading towards that thing. I noticed that there was no funding at all for any improvements or any changes in capital improvements to any of the town-owned properties. That doesn't mean that if we decide to improve one of the town-owned properties that we can't find funding some other way. Is that correct?
That's correct. The five-year CIP is a planning tool, it's a coordination tool.
Right.
Ultimately, it's the town council's budget, which allocates those resources based upon your priorities. So the council can make those adjustments as they deem necessary at any point in time.
Okay. So I will,
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmembers Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
yes.
Schooler.
Yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes. We'll go on to item number 13, American Rescue Plan Act.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'll be presenting a brief overview of the American Rescue Plan Act and its eligible uses, and proposing the amendment of the fiscal year 2021-22 budget to recognize receipt of the funds and track eligible expenditures under the provisions of the Act. The American Rescue Plan Act is the latest in the COVID-19 related relief and economic stimulus that was signed into law by President Joe Biden on March 11, 2021. The Act's overarching goal is to provide an infusion of resources to meet pandemic response needs and rebuild a stronger, more equitable economy as the country recovers. Along with aid to multiple agencies, it provides $195 billion in funding to be distributed to the 50 states and the District of Columbia. The interim rule gives some broad uses, very broad uses for the funds, including premium pay for essential workers, COVID-19 expenditures or response to negative economic impacts, investments in water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and revenue replacement for the provision of government services to the extent of the reduction in revenue due to COVID-19 public health emergency relative to revenues collected in the most recent fiscal year prior to the emergency. The state of Wisconsin put together a more non-exclusive list of eligible uses. So some ideas for uses of the funds to respond to public health emergency could be assisting with vaccines and testing and PPE, or mental health treatment, addressing negative economic impacts through unemployed worker training and relief for small businesses and impacted industries, as well as rehiring public sector employees to pre-pandemic levels. It can also address servicing the hardest hit with various educational, housing, and health needs, and improvement to infrastructure, specifically water and sewer, and broadband infrastructure to assist with universally available, high-speed, reliable, and affordable broadband coverage. The fiscal impact of the town, the first tranche was received in July 2021 and was approximately $2.6 million. The second tranche will be received in approximately 1 year, with total funds being available of about $5.2 million. Eligible expenditures can be reimbursed through December 31st, 2024, but funds can be obligated by that date as well, and then the town can spend those funds up to December 31st, 2026. Town staff is currently evaluating the various provisions of the Act, the financial impacts due to COVID, and potential qualified uses, and we will return to council with a proposed plan and alternative for policy discussion at a later date. So the recommendation is to council is to receive and file this update on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 and the corresponding fiscal impact of the act on the town, and amend the fiscal year 2021-22 special revenue budget to establish ARPA Special Revenue Fund 574 to allocate funds received and track pandemic response expenditures that are eligible for reimbursement per ARPA provisions. And that concludes the staff report, and I'm happy to answer questions after public comment.
We'll open to public comment. All right, we'll bring it back to the council. So this will be a new line item that we have to keep track of and how those monies are spent.
Correct.
Okay. Any questions before we receive and file? Yes, go right ahead.
Is there going to be any public oversee, like our Measure Y? Is there any type of public comment on how the money gets spent? Throwing out another can of worms.
So your Revenue Measure Oversight Commission was established by ordinance as part of the measures that were voter approved. This is not. This is funds that are distributed from the federal government directly to the local agency. So it is at the discretion of the town council on how those funds will be allocated and spent.
All right. Will we be advised on a variety of different projects? I'd like to see the money spent on broadband to improve it, but I don't know what $5 million buys in broadband availability. But will we
Staff
have
will
some
look
kind of
at
information
the
on if
options
we
that
can-
you have and bring back a whole menu of potential options along with other funds that are available for other sources. So for example, in the broadband example that you're talking about, there's a significant budget infusion on broadband outside of direct infusion to municipalities that might be better served in providing broadband more than what we can do with
I'm
the
sure.
limited amount. So we'll look at all of those and bring back a menu of options for the council's consideration.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else before we move forward? It's receive and file?
Mayor, this actually is resolution action, so we'll need a vote.
I'll move.
All right, we have a motion to, okay, so there's a receive and file, but then we have to amend the special revenue budget. Okay, so we have a motion to do that, amend the special, okay?
Amend the revenue budget and receive.
Dennison, second.
And Dennison will second. Roll call?
Councilmembers Dennison.
Yes.
Droz.
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler.
Yes.
And Mayor Abel.
Yes. Future agenda items.
I have a couple.
Go right ahead.
I would like to see if we could get an update from Caltrans on the project that's going through the basin, and maybe get some answers to some of the questions that I've been hearing. If we could do that. And then maybe at some point, if we could get on the agenda, if people agree, that Highway 62 corridor, we hear that as a priority, and I've heard that's something of concern to the citizens, and maybe there's something we can do to improve the look of the corridor, so.
Okay.
Very good. Yeah, I think we need to look at our corridor, and I think also with these special funds coming forward, where I saw that we can do some assistance for businesses and so forth, probably would be helpful to have that kind of a report on what's available as far as helping the looks and also the businesses down in the corridor. So I'd like to see that come in the future. We have consensus on that?
Oh, that sounds
right.
good.
Okay, and I'm sure staff will give us a sort of an update on what the state's doing as far as moving forward on allowing more housing in single-family residences. You'll be able to fill us in on that as it comes down the pipe? Okay. All right, we'll move on to our public comment section. This time, the town council takes this time to consider your comments on items concerned which are not on the agenda. When you are called to speak, please state your name and community of residence. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Inappropriate behavior that which disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting will result in a forfeiture of your public comment privileges. Town council is prohibited by state law from taking actions or discussing items not on the printed agenda. Madam Clerk?
Mayor, we have one request to speak by Bill Mayer.
Bill, thank you so much for sitting through that long meeting, sir. Kudos to you.
Good morning, or good evening, Mayor and ladies and gentlemen. If I may hand these to you, that's okay. 3 minutes is not enough time to do this.
There you go.
Therefore, gentlemen, you'll have something to read later that I have prepared. And in fact, what's happening at the moment is the town of Yucca Valley is threatening me with thousands of dollars of citations that I am not guilty of.
Can you, sorry.
Move to the microphone so we can hear you online as well.
I am not guilty of the citations for thousands of dollars. My home is being threatened, and if this continues, I could be put out on the street and become a homeless person. I'm a constituent. I'm a homeowner. I shouldn't be treated this way. I'll let you read that, and I don't want to show more of my anger. I will ask you to call me. Do not, please, continue to ignore me and not answer my telephone calls. I'm speaking directly to your town manager because I've been trying to get an answer on this issue for some weeks. Please, I will stay. I'll remain behind here. If anyone has any questions of me, this must be resolved. Please help me. I'm asking you as homeowners. You are homeowners. You live here like I do. I'm asking you to look at it from my point of view. Enough said? I have a minute left. What should I say? I don't know. This is from the heart, people. You live here too. I live here too. My family homesteaded here in the 40s. My home is one of the homesteads. Of course it can't fit all of the codes that were written afterwards. I tried. They made me take it down and destroyed what I built. They took away my dreams. And now they want thousands of dollars more. Please, help me. I'm asking you.
Thank you very much for putting this together for us. We appreciate it. We promise to look that over. All right. Thank you, sir. Anyone else from the public wishing to make a comment? All right. Thank you. We'll bring it back to our staff for staff reports and comments.
You have anything, Shane?
Yep, a couple things, Mayor and Council. Wednesday, the 15th, is the first outreach meeting for property owners, tenants, residents for the Onaga Trail, sidewalk, curb gutter, street widening project, as well as the Little League curb gutter, sidewalk, street widening project. 2 notices have been sent out to property owners as well as tenants. Hopefully, we're out on Facebook and Twitter now. With those things, press releases have gone out, and there'll probably be one more notice going out to the property owners and tenants before next week's meeting. On the 14th of September, the Parks, Recreation, Cultural Commission will be receiving a report on North Park plans and allowing or providing the opportunity for the PRCC to have input on the design of that upcoming park project. There's been some information out on social media that just want to clarify a few items. Number one, Aldi is back in plan check. They've moved from a pre-2021 holiday period opening to Easter opening of 2022 is their desired timeline. Information on social media, I think questioning Habit Burger as well as the Domino Jersey Mike's project. Both of those projects are moving forward. Those have been approved by the town. They are currently working with Southern California Edison to get electrical service to both of those sites. So town approvals have been obtained. They need to finish the building and safety process, permit and plan check process, but in terms of planning commission, both of those projects have been approved. And then finally, for the mayor and others, we now have 2 pigs at the Yucca Valley Animal Shelter that are available for adoption. So the cat room is full, there's a lot of dogs, and there are 2 pigs.
Thank you, Shane. Thank you, council, for your patience this evening. We try and keep these limited. We only had 6 items on the agenda, but they did take a little bit of time today. One of the reasons is the League of California Cities annual conference is conflicting with your next meeting schedule, so your meeting of September 21 will be dark. So wanted to make sure that we kept things rolling. As you can see, you're going to have a relatively busy fall with a number of initiatives moving forward. Tomorrow morning, if you're interested in meeting with Congressman Obernolte, he'll be doing an open house town hall meeting here in the Yucca room from 9 to 10 a.m. Mayor Pro Tem Schooler will be introducing the congressman, and it's really just an open time for the public to ask whatever they want of the congressman. Commend all of the community for their back-to-school efforts, generally pretty safe in our areas, haven't had a whole lot of concerns yet on back-to-school traffic, et cetera. We will keep the council apprised of legislation as it moves through this last cycle, including the housing legislation. I think that's it, Mayor. Appreciate your patience again this evening.
Thank you very much. We'll bring it over to our council members. Councilmember Dennison.
Thank you, Mayor. Just want to thank once again Dr. McLarney about the community livability survey. It's that kind of information that we're able to get a better pulse on the community itself and make decisions and steer hopefully our decisions in a way that the community sees beneficial to all of us. So he, by participating tonight, gave me a little more insight and kind of stitched a lot of my questions together, so it was good. And our new appointees to the Revenue Measure Oversight Commission, Ms. DeLusa and Mr. Sassnett, thank you. And to Mr. Mansell and Perez, I hope you stay interested in helping your community. I appreciate your enthusiasm. As we were saying earlier, the town manager mentioned that these positions do have openings coming and going regularly, and we would appreciate seeing you back again and for consideration. That's all.
Thank you. Councilmember Rhodes.
I just want to say it was a real pleasure tonight. I really enjoyed the meeting. It's always exciting when you get results from a census and also a survey. And so that was kind of neat. It's kind of exciting to know what people are thinking, know the demographics of the town. And I'll be excited to see the census, the final census when it comes out. And I believe tonight was Rachel's first presentation, right? You did a good job, Rachel. So anyway, that's about it. Congratulations to our the new what do you call it? Commissioners, or yeah, commissioners. And that's it. Have a great. Oh, and I did go see the fireworks and landers on Saturday. They were pretty incredible. So hopefully a lot of people got to see those. All right. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilmember Lombardo.
Duplicates on the congratulations to new commissioners, and it was a very interesting meeting tonight with all the information that we gathered on the variety of ways to communicate with our fellow citizens and the information that was on the livability study. It's always nice to hear from Rachel when she tells us we have $5.5 million entering into the pot, thanks to the federal government allocation of monies to recover from the COVID. And I look forward to October meetings when we get to discuss things like the new districts and the murals and all the other things. So it's an exciting time. Thank you. School started. Be careful. Be conscious out there. And hopefully we're getting closer to normal with things going back, except for the roads are going to be goofed up for a while. So be cautious out there with all the Caltrans people and the plans with repaving roads and that sort of thing. And that's kind of where it'll be nice to have somebody to help communicate with the public on things that are happening in the town. I see a lot of possibilities for that, to communicate ways to skirt around the new developments with the building and construction, both the sewer and the roadways that are going to be in our future. So,
Thank you very much. Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Pretty much the same. I'm anxious to see the communications committee or communications
company
contractor up and running. I think that program will be really a good way for reaching out. I'm really anxious to see how that works, and also anxious to see the mural issue get resolved as soon as possible. I'm glad we're going to be addressing that. And also, thanks to all the applicants for the Revenue Measure Oversight Committee, and congratulations to the appointees. So that's it for me.
Very good. I would like to thank the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Department on their quick response to the Yucca Valley lockdown. Turned out to be a false alarm. However, they treated the incident professionally. They moved on to the campus from lockdown, and campus was reopened all within less than 20 minutes, which is amazing. So kudos to our men and women in law enforcement and all the support services that came about. Fortunately, there was nothing to it. However, there was somebody who was guilty of calling in a false report. But our sheriff's department came in and did a fantastic job. Very impressed. And if it was an actual urgency, they would have been right there to help prevent anything from happening. So very, very impressed, very, very proud of our men and women in law enforcement. With that, as was mentioned earlier, our upcoming meeting on Tuesday, September 14th has been canceled. We'll move on to our next meeting, which will be the town of Yucca Valley is scheduled to meet right here in this room on Tuesday, October 5th at 6 p.m. We are going to move to closed session, which is a public employee performance evaluation for our town attorney. Is there any public comment before we move into closed session? All right, hearing and seeing none, we'll report out of closed session if there's any reportable action, and we thank you for attending tonight's meeting.